Chapter 336. One day later, at the entrance of Profound Sun Sect. At this moment, the two doormen of Pure Spirit Realm were standing there in boredom. They were still chatting with each other. However, all of a sudden, a figure covered in blood staggered over. "Who is it?" The two doormen immediately shouted. When they saw the person's face, they exclaimed, "Elder Chang." It turned out that this person was Li Xuanyang's eldest direct disciple, Elder Chang Wei of Profound Sun Sect. While running, Chang Wei panted and shouted, "Quick! Take me to Master Uncle Li. I have an urgent matter to report." The two doormen immediately panicked. Chang Wei was usually a high-ranking person in Profound Sun Sect. Now that he was in such a state, something terrible must have happened. Between the two of them, the older one came back to his senses first. He supported Chang Wei and walked quickly. The other doorman frowned and continued to guard the mountain gate. Not long after Chang Wei went up the mountain, another 10 people came to the entrance. These 10 people all had powerful auras. They were all in the spiritual pulse realm. Although the doorman could not see their cultivation, he often came in contact with spiritual pulse realm cultivators. He could roughly tell that they were all in the spiritual pulse realm. Thus, he became even more nervous. What could happen when 10 spiritual pulse realm cultivators came to Profound Sun Sect? When he thought of Elder Chang's miserable state, he had a bad premonition. Just as the doorman was about to ask, one of them suddenly pointed at the doorman. A yellow finger energy directly pierced through the doorman's head. The doorman's body fell to the ground. Even in death, he did not understand why they suddenly killed him. And the person who killed him was Qiu Cheng. The other 9 people were naturally Qiao Qian, Pang Yuan, the people from the 6 great clans, and the vice-commander of the city guards, Ning Xiu. Behind them, there were 80 dark lightning guards, 60 disciples of the great clans, and 200 city guards. With such a lineup, it was more than enough to destroy a half-crippled Profound Sun Sect. But there was still a huge threat in Profound Sun Sect, and that was the great elder Li Feizhou. At this moment, Li Feizhou was meeting with Chang Wei. When he saw Chang Wei's terrible injuries, he knew that something bad had happened. Of course, he knew that Li Xianyang had brought a few direct disciples and spirit transformation realm disciples down the mountain. He also guessed what Li Xianyang was going to do, but he was powerless to stop him. Thus, he could only pray that Li Xianyang would return safely. But 2 days had passed, there was no news of Li Xuanyang's group. Li Feizhou knew that there must have been an accident. However, he didn't know where Li Xianyang and the others had gone. All he could do was stay in the Profound Yang sect. Chang Wei's Li Feizhou, Li Feizhou, Li Feizhou. However, Li Feizhou was far more cautious than Li Xianyang. He helped Chang Wei over and transferred some of his spiritual energy to him. In this way, not only could he help Chang Wei recover some of his yuan qi, he could also find out if Chang Wei was real or fake. Li Feizhou quickly sensed that the cultivation method in Chang Wei's body was the golden mystic yang skill, so he dispelled the vigilance in his heart. He hurriedly asked, "What about senior brother sect leader? What the hell is going on?" "Martial uncle, it's not good. It's not good," Chang Wei said with a panicked expression, but he glanced at the people around him. Li Feizhou waved his hand, and those people left on their own accord. Chang Wei then said, "Martial uncle, the night before yesterday we followed Master to Ai Ming Mountain to trade with the people of Zhu Lu country. At first, it was very smooth, but who knew?" Chang Wei's words made Li Feizhou very uncomfortable. He panicked. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" "Who knows?" Chang Wei didn't finish his sentence. Demonic energy surged around him and a set of black demonic armor appeared. A few blood marks appeared on his forehead. At the same time, the azure rain saber was unsheathed, and an extremely condensed saber light flashed across. This saber looked very ordinary, but in this world, it was as if it was the only thing that existed. Everything else was destroyed. Li Feizhou would never have guessed that his martial nephew Chang would actually attack him. Facing this blade that seemed to cut through space, Li Feizhou couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly used his spiritual armor to resist. However, the spiritual armor was easily torn apart by the blade as if it was made of paper. Li Feizhou hurriedly put his hands in front of him. In an instant, a golden light flashed and a 5-foot large palm print appeared. Unfortunately, the palm print was torn in half by the blade before it could fully condense. However, the power of the blade was greatly reduced. In the end, the blade landed on Li Feizhou's body. His skin and flesh were torn apart and his meridians were broken. Just as the blade was about to shatter his internal organs, a majestic demonic energy burst out from his body. A ferocious headless demon suddenly appeared and blocked the fatal blow for him. But even so, Li Feizhou was seriously injured. Chang Wei sneered, "Hee, elderly of Xianyang sect is actually secretly cultivating demonic arts. If this matter were to spread, Xianyang sect's reputation would be ruined." Li Feizhou looked at Chang Wei in front of him. He was shocked and angry, but also very puzzled. He secretly tested the other party just now. Chang Wei's cultivation technique was clearly the Golden Mystic Yang technique. The appearance and injuries could be faked, but how could the cultivation technique be faked? Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that Leng Shiqi had used the system to cultivate the Golden Mystic Yang technique in an instant. And the only way he could think of to delay Li Feizhou was to use the same trick again. He had cultivated the bone transformation technique, and used this technique to change his body shape to be exactly the same as Chang Wei's. With the help of 1,000 faces, he changed his appearance so that he could deceive all eyes. Only then could he seriously injure Li Feizhou. Now that Leng Shiqi's cultivation had increased greatly, using the flash in the pan technique would no longer make him collapse, but it still consumed more than 60% of his spiritual energy. Moreover, he could no longer maintain the demonic beast blood tattoo armor and demonic fiend blood tattoo. It could be said that his battle strength was greatly reduced. Even though Li Feizhou was seriously injured, he was still an expert in the middle stage of the spirit aperture realm. The current situation was still unfavorable for Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi wasn't worried. His task was to delay Leng Shiqi. Li Feizhou also saw this point and immediately shouted, "Men." However, after a few breaths, no one came in. At the same time, there were sounds of fighting outside. Li Feizhou's heart sank. Leng Shiqi coldly said, "Li Feizhou, the Dark Thunder Guards and City Guards have already surrounded Xianyang sect. Xianyang sect will no longer exist from now on. You." Li Feizhou's eyes instantly turned crimson red. His body involuntarily emitted demonic qi. Xianyang sect was his life's work. Seeing that it was about to collapse, he seemed to be going crazy. "Ah!" Li Feizhou roared. Demonic qi surged out of his body and condensed into headless ghosts. Leng Shiqi didn't use any spiritual techniques. Instead, 5 light golden needles appeared in his hand. Chapter 337. These 5 golden needles were the golden thread demon needles that Leng Shiqi obtained from Su Lu and the other demonic cultivators. Leng Shiqi flicked his fingers and the 5 golden needles shot out. Although Li Feizhou was mad, he was still rational. He felt the threat of the golden needles and quickly ordered a few headless ghosts to intercept the golden needles. Unfortunately, the golden needles were treasures that could restrain ghosts. They pierced through the headless ghosts and nailed onto Li Feizhou's body. Immediately after, golden runes appeared and circulated around Li Feizhou's body, completely sealing all of his demonic qi. The golden thread demon needles could easily seal the 1,000-year-old black fiend demonic corpse, not to mention Li Feizhou, a half-baked demonic cultivator. With his demonic qi sealed, Li Feizhou was immediately devoured by the demonic qi ghosts. He spat out a few mouthfuls of blood with his internal organs as his aura plummeted. Li Feizhou looked at Leng Shiqi in shock. He would never have thought that Leng Shiqi was also surrounded by demonic qi. He was obviously a demonic cultivator. But this demonic cultivator actually had a treasure that could restrain demonic qi. What made him even more shocked was that Ling Shiqi had also removed his disguise. Li Feizhou immediately recognized him. Supervisor of Dark Thunder Hall, Lu. Okay. Got it. Li Feizhou gritted his teeth and spat out the words. That's right. Ling Shiqi said calmly and started chatting with Li Feizhou. His purpose here was to stall Li Feizhou, not to fight to the death with him. Even though Li Feizhou was injured, he was still an expert in the middle stage of the spirit aperture realm. Moreover, as the great elder of the profound Yang sect, no one would believe that he didn't have anything on him. So, since Li Feizhou wanted to chat with him, Ling Shiqi was naturally very willing to do so. The longer this dragged on, the more disciples of the profound Yang sect would die. As long as those people were all dead, he would be able to receive reinforcements. Ling Shiqi continued, Li Feizhou, give up. Li Xianyang is dead, and the Xianyang sect will cease to exist. If you surrender, I can let you leave with a few good seedlings. It can be considered as leaving behind some descendants. Ha ha ha. Li Feizhou laughed. Lu Xingji, who would believe your words? I have nothing to say about falling into your hands. I can only blame senior brother sect leader for being greedy. But you want me to surrender? Don't even think about it. Ling Shiqi just shook his head. He raised his hand, and cold air and raging flames swept out and enveloped Li Feizhou. Of course, Ling Shiqi did not expect the fire and ice tornado to kill Li Feizhou. His hands quickly formed a seal, and a strange evil aura appeared, condensing into a terrifying evil aura in midair. Ghost Shadow shrieked, and waves of evil aura surged out and covered Li Feizhou. In an instant, several kinds of negative emotions surged into his mind, and the evil aura also continuously corroded his broken body. Xia Tian Wailing Curse. Under the combined attack of the fire and ice tornado and the Xia Tian Wailing Curse, Li Feizhou could not resist at all. He could only struggle with the golden light. At the same time, his aura continued to decrease. Ling Shiqi was cautious, so he did not dare to rush forward. He was not in a rush, so he continued to use spells to wear down Li Feizhou's strength. Not long after, the sounds outside gradually decreased, and then 3 people walked in. It was Qiu Cheng, Xiao Qian, and Pang Yuan. They were covered in blood and filled with killing intent. Seeing them walk in, Ling Shiqi knew that there was no suspense in the battle outside. Xiao Qian cupped his hands and said, Sir, Li Feizhou's 4 direct disciples and all the disciples in the spirit transformation realm have been killed. There are only a few low-level disciples that are being eliminated. Pooh! When Li Feizhou heard this, he was so anxious that he spat out another mouthful of blood. A look of despair appeared in his eyes. He muttered, Dead, the profound Yang sect is dead. When Xiao Qian and the other 2 saw Li Feizhou's miserable state, their faces were filled with shock. Li Feizhou was a spirit cultivator at the middle stage of the spirit aperture realm, yet he was defeated by Ling Shiqi. At first, when Ling Shiqi said that he had a way to deal with Li Feizhou, they did not believe him. Now that they saw the truth, they had no choice but to believe him. At the same time, they were shocked by the speed of Ling Shiqi's strength. When they first met Ling Shiqi, he was only at the 5th level of the Spirit Pulse realm. In less than 2 months, his cultivation had soared to the 9th level of the Spirit Pulse realm. His strength had also become even more terrifying. When Ling Shiqi was at the Spirit Pulse realm middle stage, he was able to kill Spirit Pulse late stage cultivators. Now that he was at the 9th level of the Spirit Pulse realm, he was able to defeat Spirit Aperture realm middle stage cultivators. This kind of terrifying speed of improvement was simply shocking. Of course, Ling Shiqi was able to defeat Li Feizhou because of luck. First, he launched a sneak attack which greatly reduced Li Feizhou's strength. Then, he coincidentally used the golden thread demon needles to restrain Li Feizhou's demonic arts, resulting in the current situation. If it was a direct confrontation, Ling Shiqi believed that he would be able to hold on for a while. Therefore, Ling Shiqi did not care about their shocked expressions and said to Li Feizhou, Xianyang sect has already been destroyed, why are you still holding on? Li Feizhou sighed deeply, AI, this is fate. Xian Yang sect will face this sooner or later. Whatever, you guys can do it. After Li Feizhou finished speaking, he closed his eyes. His body no longer flickered with golden light, as if he was waiting for death. Ling Shiqi gave a signal with his eyes. Pang Yuan and the other two carefully approached. Even if Li Feizhou said so, they did not dare to be careless. Qiu Qing pointed, Xiao Qian stabbed, and Pang Yuan's blade fell. The three spirit pulse realm cultivators all used their strongest spiritual techniques to attack Li Feizhou, who was waiting for death. Just as the three spiritual techniques were about to hit him, Li Feizhou suddenly opened his eyes, which were filled with boundless hatred. Die! He roared, and his head flew into the air on its own. Blood spurted out from his neck like a fountain. The blood condensed into the body of a headless ghost, and Li Feizhou's head fused with the ghost, turning into a half-human, half-ghost existence. Li Feizhou's sudden change instantly sent Xiao Qian and the other two flying. Then, he directly charged towards Ling Shiqi. Not good. Pang Yuan shouted and immediately rushed over. Ling Shiqi did not move. His hands formed the grasping flower seal, and his body emitted a faint golden light. At the same time, a silver-white brilliance filled with holy power suddenly lit up behind him, weaving into a cloak. Before Li Feizhou could get close to Ling Shiqi, half of his body was vaporized by the holy power and holy light. Ling Shiqi's ink jade sword came out of its sheath, and then his body disappeared. Li Feizhou was stunned for a moment. Then, he saw colorful glazed flower petals falling from the sky. Just as Ling Shiqi was puzzled, the flowers suddenly shot out countless sword qi. Then, hundreds of Ling Shiqi appeared out of thin air. He waved his sword qi and formed a sword net to attack Jiang Chen. Chaotic flower dazzling eyes. The boundless sword qi and the violent sword net cut Li Feizhou into pieces in the blink of an eye. Strangely, Li Feizhou was not completely dead. He unwillingly roared, "No!" At this moment, Pang Yuan charged over. Li Feizhou used the last bit of strength to charge at Pang Yuan. Pang Yuan was caught off guard and was hit by Li Feizhou. His body flew out, and he spat out blood. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Li Feizhou's blood-red body finally dissipated, and there was no longer any signs of life. However, Ling Shiqi's face was pale. Originally, after using Flash of the Night and several spirit techniques, he did not have much spirit energy left. Now that he had forcefully used chaotic flower dazzling eyes, his spirit energy was slightly overdrawn. Fortunately, he absorbed Li Feizhou's remnant soul and recovered some. Then, he took Li Feizhou's mustard seed bag and walked out of the hall. Xiao Qian and Qiu Qing supported the dying Pang Yuan and followed behind him. Outside, the entire Xian Yang sect was stained with blood. Everywhere was filled with the smell of blood. Looking around, there was not a single Xian Yang sect disciple left. A dignified spirit cultivator sect, the Profound Yang sect, was actually completely destroyed by Ling Shiqi. Chapter 338. The news of the destruction of the third-rate sect, Profound Yang sect, caused an uproar in the North region and even the entire West Desolate province. The West Desolate province was an important place at the border. The spirit cultivator sects there had always been under the control of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Thus, the spirit cultivator sects in the West Desolate province had always been very obedient. Not to mention the massacre of a sect, there hadn't even been any major conflicts. However, the Profound Yang sect was actually destroyed. The reason was even more shocking. The Profound Yang sect actually dared to collude with the Zhulu country to smuggle refined iron. In the border region, the Profound Yang sect dared to play such a trick. They were truly audacious. They deserved such an outcome. What was even more shocking was that the person who destroyed the Profound Yang sect was merely a supervisor from the Dark Thunder Manor in the Mist Chi City, a Spirit Pulse Realm supervisor. This was the first time they had heard of a Spirit Pulse Realm supervisor. However, this person used some unknown method to destroy the Profound Yang sect that had two Spirit Aperture Realm experts. Once this matter was out, all the powers in the West Desolate Province, including the Spirit Cultivator sects, the Discipline Commission, the Dark Thunder Guards, and the various city lord residences all remembered the name of this supervisor. Lu Xingji. As the instigator of this matter, Lin Shiqi had already brought his subordinates back to the Mist Qi city with dozens of carriages. Those carriages were naturally filled with the cultivation resources of the Profound Yang sect. Although they also had many mustard seed bags, these resources were all reserved for distribution. Of course, it was better to keep an eye on them. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if someone were to fill their own pockets. At this time, hundreds of large boxes filled the entire courtyard of the Dark Thunder Manor. Not long after, another group of people carried dozens of boxes in. The leader was Lin Shiqi. And these boxes were plundered from the Du family. Before the news of the Profound Yang sect's destruction spread, Lin Shiqi had already gone to destroy the Du family. Furthermore, he had also sent people to the surrounding cities to eradicate the families that were involved in the smuggling of refined iron. Presumably, a large amount of resources would be sent over soon. When Lin Shiqi walked into the courtyard, his eyes lit up when he saw the countless cultivation resources before him. There was no need to even mention Qiu Cheng, Xiao Qian, and the Dark Thunder Guards. They had probably never seen so many resources in their entire lives, but now, it was right in front of them, waving at them. Many people were even drooling all over the floor. But no one dared to touch it. They knew that before Lin Shiqi spoke, whoever dared to touch it would die. Lin Shiqi clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. Although we've eliminated Xianyang sect and gotten rid of a threat for dynasty, we've also lost a Dark Lightning envoy. Lin Shiqi was talking about Pang Yuan, who had been seriously injured by Li Feizhou before he died. On their way back, Pang Yuan had already died. The reason why Lin Shiqi had Thousand Face replace Pang Yuan was to appease his subordinates and eliminate dissidents. Now that he had secured his position as a supervisor, Pang Yuan's existence was no longer as important. Moreover, no matter how well Thousand Face disguised himself, there would still be some flaws, especially when he could not fully unleash his true strength. Therefore, Lin Shiqi took this opportunity to release Thousand Face. When everyone heard Lin Shiqi mention Pang Yuan, they lowered their heads silently. Although Pang Yuan was usually a little hot-tempered, he was generous and forthright. Everyone trusted him. Now that he had died in Li Feizhou's hands, everyone was a little sad. However, Lin Shiqi's next words dispelled all their sadness. He said, "It's because of people like Pang Yuan who aren't afraid of death that we were able to destroy the Xianyang sect so easily and obtain such abundant cultivation resources." When they heard about cultivation resources, everyone's eyes were filled with anticipation and excitement. Lin Shiqi said, "Among these resources, 20% will be mine and 20% will be yours." Hiss. 20%? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They did not expect Lin Shiqi to be so generous. 20% may sound like a small amount, but there were hundreds of boxes here. If they counted carefully, each of them could carry 2 or 3 boxes home. These resources were far more valuable than their combined monthly salaries for several years. "Thank you for the reward, sir." Everyone shouted in unison. Lin Shiqi waved his hand and said, "This is what you deserve. As long as you are loyal to me, there will be more of these things in the future. Take out 10% of the resources and give it to the 6 great families and the city lord's mansion." 10% for the 6 great families and the city lord's mansion was not a lot. Although the 6 great families had already sided with him, they were just like the Dark Lightning Guards. If you give them some benefits, they will support you even more. As for the city lord's mansion, the city lord Sun Gang was called over by him. Lin Shiqi took advantage of Sun Gang's absence to transfer the city guards away. The 5% of the resources was a small token of his sincerity. The last 50% will be sealed in the treasury. Yes. After Lin Shiqi arranged everything, he began to choose the resources he needed. For the current Lin Shiqi, there were 2 things that he needed the most. First, cultivation methods and spiritual techniques. Needless to say, spiritual techniques were Ling Shiqi's foundation. Cultivation methods were also very important. This was because Ling Shiqi was now at the 9th level of the Spirit Pulse realm. Although this was the last level of the Spirit Pulse realm, it was just the beginning for him. He had already opened 10 spirit pulses in his body, but his goal was to open all 72 spirit pulses. However, the cultivation techniques he currently possessed, including the Heaven Fiend 9 Underworld's Demonic Beast Blood Devouring Record, the 5 Gods Flowing Light Technique, the 1000 Revolutions Illusory World Technique, the Amorphous Truth, and the Golden Mystic Yang Technique added up to only 42 spirit veins. This was because these cultivation methods also had spirit pulses in common. Therefore, Ling Shiqi needed more cultivation methods of rank 4 and above to open more spirit pulses. Unfortunately, the resources of the Xian Yang sect and Du family only had some low-level cultivation methods and spiritual techniques. As for the high-level ones, they were probably hidden in the minds of Du Hechang, Li Xianyang, and Li Feizhou. Other than cultivation methods and spiritual techniques, Ling Shiqi also needed to prepare for his breakthrough to the Spirit Aperture realm. Breaking through from the Spirit Pulse realm to the Spirit Aperture realm required two things at the same time. One was to condense the liquid spirit energy in the body into a spirit spiral, and the other was to open one of the 360 spirit apertures in the body. The best way to do this was to take the Spirit Spiral Pill and the Awakening Pill. However, these two pills were not only expensive, they were also priceless. Under normal circumstances, even if you had the money, you wouldn't be able to buy them. Coincidentally, among the resources of the Xian Yang sect, there were 3 Spirit Spiral Pills and 1 Awakening Pill. Ling Shiqi naturally took them without hesitation. As for the rest, he chose some high-level body refining resources and materials. He waved his hand and used the mustard seed bracelet to store the 20% of the resources that belonged to him, filling the mustard seed bracelet to the brim. Fortunately, he changed to a higher-level mustard seed bracelet, otherwise, he would have to use several mustard seed bags to store them. After everyone was done distributing the resources, Ling Shiqi returned to his room. The first thing he did was to sell 80% of the items in the mustard seed bracelet to the system. His system coins directly soared to 6,382 points. Ling Shiqi looked at the sky-high price of system coins and was moved. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to do 5 unlimited draws. He left over 1,000 system coins just in case he needed them. After all, the system store refreshed every day. If something he wanted appeared but he couldn't afford it, then he would lose out. Then, he opened the lottery page and pressed the unlimited draw button. Chapter 339. Congratulations to the host for winning the beginner prize, Melting Iron Rod. Ling Shiqi's face darkened when he saw the notification. This was the first time he had won a beginner prize in the infinite draw. He had wasted 990 system coins. Ling Shiqi wiped his face as if he wanted to make it look whiter. He then clicked on the infinite draw again. Congratulations to the host for winning the intermediate prize, Shaoyang Sword Qi. Ling Shiqi's face finally looked better. Although the intermediate prize was a loss, it was still better than the beginner prize. Moreover, this spiritual technique was quite useful. Shaoyang Sword Qi was a level 4 spiritual technique. When the sword Qi was released, it was as sharp as the rising sun. When the sword Qi entered the body, it would burn the meridians. It was a very good spiritual technique. Ling Shiqi originally had channel unblocking sword Qi and frost sword Qi. However, as his cultivation level increased, the power of these two sword Qi could no longer keep up. For example, when he went to kill Li Xianyang, even if he released hundreds of frost sword Qi, it could not cause any fatal damage. Instead, Li Xianyang found a chance to escape. This Shaoyang sword Qi made up for it. However, it was still a loss. Ling Shiqi's face darkened. He had already won the beginner and intermediate prizes consecutively. It was equivalent to about 1,900 system coins going down the drain. At this time, he already regretted it. It was not as good as 20 intermediate draws. However, the infinite draw was like this. There was no upper or lower limit. Of course, it was impossible to win every time. Since Leng Shiqi had already decided to do the infinite draw, he would not change his mind easily. Therefore, he clicked on the infinite draw again. Congratulations to the host for winning the top prize, Yin-Yang Spirit Gathering Formation. Top prize. Leng Shiqi first wondered if he had seen wrongly. Then, with a flash of light, he saw a set of formation plates and formation flags appear in front of him. This was actually a mobile array formation. Leng Shiqi quickly read through the method of using the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation. Even though he had a strong will, he could not help but breathe heavily. The Yin-Yang Spirit Convergence Array, as its name implied, was a type of spirit convergence array. Its most powerful aspect was its domineering nature. The tyrannical plundering of all the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the vicinity could greatly increase the speed of cultivation. However, the cost of using the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation was also very high. In order to activate the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Array, the minimum requirement was 500 Spirit Stones. Moreover, 500 Spirit Stones were only enough to maintain the array for 2 hours. The more Spirit Stones he put in, the better the effect. How was this spirit gathering? This was clearly wealth gathering. However, he still had to try it out to see how effective it would be. Then, he formed a spiritual seal with his hands, and the Yin-Yang Spirit Gathering Formation's formation disc and formation flags scattered in all directions and hid them underground. Immediately, with the Leng Shiqi as the center, an extremely complex array appeared in a radius of several feet. At the outermost periphery of the array, there were densely packed grooves. Leng Shiqi waved his hand and 500 spirit stones flew out and landed on top of the grooves. Then, the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation suddenly bloomed with a dazzling purple-blue brilliance. Leng Shiqi only heard a muffled roar in his ears. Then, the array began to madly devour the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the vicinity like a black hole. Leng Shiqi felt that the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the surroundings had indeed become much denser and denser. In the blink of an eye, it had become 2 times, 3 times, 10 times. The heaven and earth spiritual qi in the room had become 10 times denser before it stopped increasing. Leng Shiqi secretly took a deep breath. He only needed to cultivate in this environment for 2 hours, and it was almost equivalent to a day and a night of cultivation. 500 spirit stones was definitely not a loss. Spirit stones could still provide a considerable amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi for spirit cultivators below the 4th level of the heaven realm. However, after reaching the 4th level of the heaven realm, the effect of ordinary spirit stones would be greatly reduced. Therefore, for Leng Shiqi, ordinary spirit stones were only used as currency. Now, he could use the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation to convert these useless spirit stones into real spiritual qi. It could be said that he had another way to quickly increase his cultivation. However, this method was really too expensive. Now, Leng Shiqi had plundered a lot of spirit stones from several families and the profound Yang sect, but there were not many in his hands. Especially when he was choosing cultivation resources previously, he did not take too many spirit stones. Now, he only had about 7,000 spirit stones in total. This number was considered a lot for a spirit cultivator in the late stage of the spirit pulse realm. However, if he wanted to continue using the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation, it was far from enough. More than 7,000 spirit stones were only enough to last for a dozen hours. Leng Shiqi pondered. After the families in the other cities who smuggled iron were destroyed, he would have to take more spirit stones. Next, he cultivated in the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Array for 2 hours. He was fascinated by the feeling of his spiritual power increasing. After finishing his cultivation, Leng Shiqi put the Yin and Yang Spirit Gathering Formation into the system space. It was really convenient to carry this thing around. After putting away the formation, he opened the lottery page again. He still reserved 2 unlimited lottery chances. When he opened the unlimited lottery again, a stream of light flashed and a card appeared in his hand. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, card, Faceless Manipulator. The advanced prize was not very profitable, but at least it was not a loss. Leng Shiqi looked at the introduction of the card again. Card, Faceless Manipulator, choose a non-human unit and become its clone. When Leng Shiqi saw this description, his first reaction was that it was different from what he remembered. Then, he immediately thought of a person. Or rather, a monster, 9 Leave. According to the description of this card, he could use it to clone another 9 Leave and directly create a big monster. However, the cloned 9 Leave would probably have no self-awareness like Purple Feather. Even so, it would still be a big monster. Just thinking about it made Leng Shiqi feel a little excited. He also began to miss 9 Leave a little. Leng Shiqi pondered for a moment. It was best to wait for 9 Leave's cultivation to recover before using this card. Only then would he be able to unleash its full potential, so he stored it in the system space. In the end, he struck while the iron was hot and clicked on the unlimited lottery. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, 9 Scrolls of Buddhist Scriptures. When Leng Shiqi saw the advanced prize for the first time, he was delighted. However, when he saw that the prize was 9 Scrolls of Buddhist Scriptures, he was a little stunned. And the system really gave him 9 Scrolls of Buddhist Scriptures. Mahaprajna, Mystic Dharma Lotus Sutra, Vidyalaya Sutra, Vajraprajna Paramitha Sutra, Amitba Sutra, these Buddhist scriptures were said to be 9 scrolls, but there was a big pile in front of him. Leng Shiqi flipped through the Buddhist scriptures one by one. After a while, he could not help but feel puzzled. These were indeed genuine Buddhist scriptures, but they did not contain any cultivation methods or spiritual skills. They looked like very normal Buddhist scriptures. But why were these things classified as advanced prizes? Chapter 340. 2 days later, Leng Shiqi arrived at the West Desolation City. The West Desolation City was thousands of miles away from the West Desolation City. Even if he rode a spirit horse, it would take him about 4 days to arrive. But with the Fate ability, it was much easier for him to travel. In just 2 days, he arrived at the West Desolation City. At this moment, he was standing at the entrance of the West Desolation Province's Dark Thunder Guard headquarters. Leng Shiqi's purpose was to meet the inspector of the West Desolation Province's Dark Thunder Guard, Yu Ruifeng. When Yu Ruifeng heard that Leng Shiqi wanted to meet him, he welcomed him with a smile. Ha ha ha, nephew Lu is here. Come in and have a seat. Leng Shiqi cupped his fists and said, Greetings, Lord Yu. Yu Ruifeng patted Leng Shiqi's shoulder affectionately and said, There's no need to be so formal between us. Just call me Martial Uncle. This. Leng Shiqi showed a hesitant expression. Yu Ruifeng's face turned serious. I've been through life and death situations with your master. If nephew Lu treats me like an outsider, you're not giving me face, and also not giving your master face. Leng Shiqi immediately changed his tone and said, Greetings, Martial Uncle. That's right. Come, sit. Yu Ruifeng smiled very brightly, as if he was really meeting a junior of his own family. Leng Shiqi sat on Yu Ruifeng's left side and said, Martial Uncle Yu, I'm actually here for the matter of the Profound Yang sect. Yu Ruifeng secretly thought that it was indeed so. His face showed a bit of admiration. Nephew Lu, I already know that you found out that the Profound Yang sect colluded with the Zhu Lu country to smuggle refined iron. This is a great contribution. You were able to defeat the Profound Yang sect with Li Xianyang and Li Feizhou as a spirit pulse stage practitioner. This is really impressive. Now, the most talked about name in the entire West Desolation province is you. You're really worthy of being Brother Chu's disciple. Nephew Lu will definitely be someone extraordinary in the future. Leng Shiqi said modestly, it was just a fluke. Oh, I also specially prepared a small gift for Martial Uncle Yu. It's just that I'm new here and don't know what Martial Uncle likes. I hope Martial Uncle doesn't take offense. After saying that, he took out 8 mustard seed bags from his bosom. He lined up the 8 mustard seed bags and made a please gesture to Yu Ruifeng. A faint gleam flashed across Yu Ruifeng's eyes. He picked up a mustard seed bag and opened it. Even though he was an inspector, he could not help but reveal a greedy look. This mustard seed bag was filled to the brim with cultivation resources. And there were as many as 8 such mustard seed bags. Yu Ruifeng took a deep breath, then put down the mustard seed bag and asked, "Nephew, what do you mean by that?" Leng Shiqi smiled and said, "Martial nephew is just being filial to martial uncle. There is no other meaning. Since nephew has such good intentions, as your martial uncle, if I were to refuse, wouldn't I be wasting my good intentions?" Although Yu Ruifeng said this, he immediately added, "However, it doesn't make sense for me to take martial nephew's things for free. How about this, martial uncle can grant you 3 reasonable conditions, how about it?" Hearing this, Leng Shiqi thought to himself, "It's done." And it was much smoother than he had imagined. The things he took out were actually half of the profound Yang sect's resources. Originally, these were promised to 9 Leave, but 9 Leave had gone out on his own, and it was unknown when he would return. Rather than letting these resources collect dust, it was better to use them to solve many hidden troubles. As for the resources promised to 9 Leave, he also had a way to get them, but it would take some time. As the saying goes, money makes the world go round. Leng Shiqi did not believe that Yu Ruifeng was a person who did not do anything. Now that he had tested him, he found that he was indeed a very greedy person. However, the more greedy a person was, the easier it was to deal with them. As long as you could give them enough benefits, they would give you the corresponding benefits. Leng Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "These resources should be given to martial uncle. It just so happens that martial nephew has a few headaches recently, and I would like to ask martial uncle you for help." Yu Ruifeng smiled and said, "Nephew, there's no harm in asking." Leng Shiqi raised a finger and said, "Martial nephew wants to know, how big is the credit for destroying the profound Yang sect and breaking the Zhulu country's plan to smuggle iron?" The reason why he asked this was because he was afraid that Yu Ruifeng would divide his credit. From beginning to end, this matter was arranged by Leng Shiqi, but after all, he was only a supervisor. Above him, there was still the supervisor in charge of the North County, Duan Chun, and the supervisor in front of him, Yu Ruifeng. No matter how big Leng Shiqi's credit was, it had to be reported, so whether it was Duan Chun or Yu Ruifeng, they would definitely divide a part of his credit. So Leng Shiqi wanted to take the credit that should belong to him. All the credit. He always remembered why he joined the Dark Thunder Guard. He did not join to make money, but to climb up. However, his qualifications were too shallow. If he wanted to climb up, he must have far more credit than others. So credit was the most important to Leng Shiqi. Yu Ruifeng's expression did not change, but his tone was not as enthusiastic as before. "Nephew's credit is indeed big, and it involves the Zhulu country. I have already reported this matter to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters. How about this, I will add another report and put in a few good words for you." When Leng Shiqi heard this, he knew that Yu Ruifeng must have taken a part of his credit. Now that Yu Ruifeng agreed, Leng Shiqi felt that he was not too slow. Then, he stretched out 2 fingers. "Uncle Master you know that Master is an itinerant cultivator after all. That's why I've always been shy about money. So I plan to do a small business near Lan Chi City, but I don't know if this is in accordance with the rules of the Dark Thunder Guard." He was naturally talking about the matter of him openly supporting the smuggling of iron from several large families. Regarding this matter, he had also given a lot of benefits to Duan Chun to help him suppress it. However, Leng Shiqi was no longer satisfied with a mere Lan Chi city. He needed someone of a higher level to be his backer. Speaking of this, Yu Ruifeng waved his hand and said casually, "As the saying goes, blocking one's path to wealth is like killing one's parents. Nephew, go ahead and do it. Nothing will happen with me around." Leng Shiqi did not expect Yu Ruifeng to agree so readily. He raised a 3rd finger and said, "Martial uncle Yu, everyone knows that I destroyed the profound Yang sect, but I also lost a lot of my Dark Thunder Guard subordinates. Especially with the death of a Dark Thunder envoy, it can be said to be a heavy loss. Now, Marshal Nephew needs a lot of manpower. Of course, Marshal Nephew also knows that the Dark Thunder Guard has always been in short supply, so why don't you let me recruit them myself? Yu Ruifeng was an astute person. He immediately knew that Lin Shiqi wanted to cultivate his own team, but this was human nature. However, recruiting Dark Thunder Guards was not a small matter. He said in a deep voice, I can let you recruit Dark Thunder Guards and Dark Thunder Envoys yourself, but there can't be too many people. I'll only give you 50 Dark Thunder Guards and 3 Dark Thunder Envoys. Lin Shiqi smiled in his heart. Yu Ruifeng had given him more spots than he had expected, so he agreed without hesitation. He had successfully completed his mission this time. Not only did he solve all future problems, but he also managed to climb up Yu Ruifeng's support. Just as he was about to leave, Yu Ruifeng said, That's right, nephew, don't walk around casually after you go back. We might make a trip to Zhulu country in a while. Zhulu country? Lin Shiqi couldn't help but be puzzled. However, he immediately thought that this might have something to do with him destroying Zhulu country's transportation of refined iron. Yu Ruifeng said, Zhulu country dared to transport refined iron in the imperial territory. The imperial court will definitely send people to investigate. As the inspector of the Western Baron province, I will definitely go. You are the biggest contributor to this matter. You also have conclusive evidence in your hands. When the time comes, you will come with me. Chapter 341. Lin Shiqi couldn't help but be stunned when he suddenly heard that he was going to Zhulu country. His thoughts turned quickly as doubts arose in his heart. It was true that the Dark Lightning Guards monitored the entire Thunderfire dynasty, but how could they control Zhulu country? He had indeed caught evidence of Zhulu country secretly transporting refined iron. Not only did he have a large amount of refined iron as evidence, but he also had Jill as a witness. It could be said that he had caught both the man and the goods. However, even if they were going to negotiate with Zhulu country, it shouldn't be the Dark Lightning Guard's turn. There were hundreds of court officials above and the border army outside. How could they let the Dark Lightning Guards go to Zhulu country to investigate? Yu Ruifeng seemed to have seen through Lin Shiqi's doubts. He said, the reason why this matter fell on us is because the dynasty doesn't want to fall out with Zhulu country. After all, both sides are still allies on the surface. Although Zhulu country is only a small country and its territory isn't even as big as the West Desolate province, it is still a country in the end. According to the division of forces, it is still 30% stronger than the top forces. Now that the Thunderfire dynasty isn't stable internally, it's not good to have any more incidents. That's why this task was given to the Dark Lightning Guards. However, it will be some time before the Imperial Order is issued. You just have to wait in Lanqi City. I will send someone to inform you when the time comes. Lin Shiqi finally understood. This time, Zhulu country's smuggling of refined iron was a big matter. However, the Thunderfire dynasty didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so they just let them go through the motions. Of course, they would definitely be able to reap some benefits from this trip, so he was willing to make a trip. At the same time, Lin Shiqi also received a message from Yu Ruifeng's words, the Thunderfire dynasty wasn't peaceful internally. However, he didn't care too much. As the saying went, the emperor was far away. He was now at the border of the dynasty, so no matter how much trouble there was in the dynasty, it wouldn't affect the West Desolate province. Afterward, Lin Shiqi bade farewell to Yu Ruifeng and returned to Lanqi City as quickly as possible. This trip took a total of 4 days. When he returned, the other 4 families that were in charge of the smuggling of refined iron in the cities had also been eliminated. Carts after carts of cultivation resources were delivered into Dark Thunder Manor's courtyard one after another, causing everyone's eyes to turn red with envy. However, these resources were all sealed in the treasury and were not distributed to everyone. They were to be saved up for 9 leave. When Lin Shiqi returned, Qiu Cheng and Xiao Qian came looking for him with tired faces. Qiu Cheng didn't care about etiquette. He drank a large pot of tea and said, Sir, you're back. We've been busy these past few days. They destroyed the Xianyang sect and several families. Although these people deserved it, the Dark Thunder Guards also had to go through a lot of procedures. These things had been done by Qiu Cheng all the time. These days, he almost didn't sleep. Qiao Qian, on the other hand, was responsible for sealing up resources, handing over missions, and managing the Dark Lightning Guards. They did have a lot of power in their hands, but they were exhausted. Leng Shiqi also knew that there were too few Dark Lightning envoys in his Dark Lightning manor. Only Qiu Cheng and Qiao Qian were enough to keep him busy. Thus, he said, "Don't worry. I've already gotten the permission of the inspector. I can recruit 50 Dark Lightning Guards and 3 Dark Lightning envoys." Qiu Cheng and Qiao Qian were both happy and sad at the same time. They were happy that there were people to share some of the responsibility and pressure, but at the same time, they also had to share some of the power. Leng Shiqi said meaningfully, "You're both veterans of Dark Thunder Manor in Mist Qi City. You'll have to put in more effort in the future." These words were to reassure them. Even if there were new Dark Lightning envoys in the future, the two of them would still be the most important. Qiao Qian and Qiao Qian were also slightly relieved. "You two have been very busy recently. I'll do the recruitment myself." Leng Shiqi directly took the responsibility for this matter, so the two of them naturally had nothing to say. From the next day onwards, Dark Thunder Manor began recruiting Dark Lightning Guards and Dark Lightning envoys. This news attracted a lot of attention. It wasn't because of anything else. Dark Thunder Manor had just recruited 30 Dark Lightning Guards a while ago. Now they were recruiting again. Was the Dark Lightning Guard so short of people? However, this was the Dark Lightning Guard. Being able to enter the Dark Lightning Guard was equivalent to having an iron rice bowl, so it still attracted a lot of people. In particular, Leng Shiqi was in the limelight recently. Many young elites came because of his reputation. The originally deserted streets of Dark Thunder Manor became much more lively. Leng Shiqi also became busy. Being personally recruited by him as a supervisor, it was naturally very strict. 80% of the people were rejected by him. Even so, there were still a lot of people who flocked to him. In 4 to 5 days, he recruited 50 Dark Lightning Guards in the Spirit Transformation Realm and 3 Dark Lightning Envoys in the Spirit Pulse Realm. In fact, these people were all assassins from the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Now, Leng Shiqi had 120 Dark Lightning Guards under him. Most of them were from the Blood Cloth Pavilion. 3 of the 5 Dark Lightning Envoys were also Blood Cloth assassins from the Blood Cloth Pavilion. It could be said that Dark Thunder Manor in Mist Qi City was completely under his control. On this day, Leng Shiqi called Qiu Cheng and Qiao Qian over. When they came in, they saw that there were already 3 Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators sitting there. They knew that these 3 people were the 3 new Dark Lightning Envoys. "Sit, these 3 are the new Dark Lightning Envoys." Leng Shiqi raised his hand and said, "This is old Mr. Guan Feihong. He's in the late stage of the Spirit Pulse Realm." The old man sitting beside Leng Shiqi stood up and cupped his hands. He had a kind smile on his face. He looked gentle and amiable, giving people a good impression. "This old man is Guan Feihong. I'm already so old, but I'm still able to receive Lord Lu's favor and become a Dark Lightning Envoy. In the future, I'll have to ask the 2 of you to take care of me." When Qiao Qian and Qiu Cheng heard Leng Shiqi say that this person was in the late stage of the Spirit Pulse Realm, their hearts tightened. However, seeing Guan Feihong like this, they thought that he was easy to get along with, so they said a few polite words. Actually, Guan Feihong had another name. Black-striped blood-clothed assassin, heart soul. Seeing through people's hearts, hooking their souls. Although he was old and could no longer use his full strength, Leng Shiqi had specially picked him because he liked his scheming and intelligence. Leng Shiqi thought that his shrewdness was not bad, but it would be better if he had a think tank by his side to give him advice. Moreover, he often went into closed-door cultivation. It was important to have someone outside who could take care of things. Following this, Leng Shiqi pointed at an ordinary-looking middle-aged man. He was the kind that could not be found in a crowd. This person stood up and smiled. This one is Qian Ming. I'm in the middle stage of the spirit pulse realm. This is my first time here, please forgive me. Qian Ming was actually Thousand Face. Thousand Face's ability was too useful. Ling Shiqi had him change his identity and stay by his side. As for the last person, he was wearing tight black clothes. He hugged a thin sword and had a cold expression. He only said 3 words coldly, Qin Jianchen. Qin Jianchen's cold attitude made the others a bit unhappy, especially Qiu Cheng, who was already frowning. He was actually a famous black-striped blood-clothed assassin in the Western Desolate Province, Ghost Sword. He had once assassinated a Spirit Aperture Realm expert with his late-stage Spirit Pulse Realm cultivation. Chapter 342. The 3 blood-clothed assassins that Ling Shiqi specially transferred from the blood-clothing pavilion all had their own areas of expertise. Guan Feihong was astute and could help him come up with plans. Gan Ming was ever-changing and many things in the dark could be done through him. As for Qin Jianchen, he was a powerful fighting force. Under Ling Shiqi, whether it was Qiu Cheng, Qiao Qian, Guan Feihong, or Gan Ming, they all had their own strengths. But the only thing they lacked was an extremely strong fighting force. Now that he had Qin Jianchen, he finally made up for this and didn't need to do everything himself. This also saved him a lot of time to cultivate. After they got to know each other, Ling Shiqi said, "Send people to send invitations to all the families in the cities. Tell them that I will be hosting a banquet in 3 days at the Drunken Fragrance House." They looked at each other and guessed what Ling Shiqi was going to do. Soon after, the news spread to the 5 cities under his jurisdiction, and all the big clans heard about it. When they received the invitations, they were all secretly delighted. They were also very clear about the situation of the 6 great families in Mist Qi City. With the support of Ling Shiqi, the 6 great families could be said to have made a lot of money, making people jealous. Now that this good thing had happened to them, they were naturally secretly happy. Moreover, they also knew that Ling Shiqi was a ruthless person. Since he took office, he had already destroyed several families. He even destroyed the dignified spirit cultivator sect, the Profound Yang sect. Now, he was even more famous. They definitely couldn't afford to offend such a person, nor did they dare to. Thus, they hurriedly rushed to Mist Qi City, afraid that they would be a step too late. And this news also spread to the supervisor in charge of the North region, Duan Chun. At this moment, Duan Chun was talking with another supervisor, Yu Zimo. Yu Zimo was in charge of supervising the area adjacent to Ling Shiqi. They were talking about Ling Shiqi. Master Duan, Lu Xingji destroyed the Profound Yang sect and destroyed Zhu Lu country's conspiracy. Now, everyone in the North County knows the name Lu Xingji. Yu Zimo's words were full of deep meaning, and the meaning of his words was very obvious. The people in the North region only knew Lu Xingji of the Dark Thunder Guards, but not him. Moreover, Duan Chun didn't know that Ling Shiqi destroyed the Profound Yang sect. He even found out later than Yu Ruifeng. Ling Shiqi actually did such a big thing, such a big contribution, without telling him, and did it himself. Duan Chun already had a huge prejudice against Ling Shiqi. As for the resources that Ling Shiqi gave him before, how could it be compared to the contribution of destroying the Profound Yang sect? In fact, Duan Chun had a bad impression of Ling Shiqi from the beginning because he knew that Ling Shiqi had entered through the back door. Especially when Ling Shiqi became a supervisor as soon as he entered the Dark Thunder Guards, he was even more dissatisfied. However, this was Yu Ruifeng's order, so he had to follow it. Originally, he thought that Ling Shiqi wouldn't have a good time even if he became a supervisor, so he didn't pay too much attention to him. But later, Ling Shiqi suddenly sent a large number of resources to him and asked him to suppress the matter of smuggling. This let Duan Chun know that Ling Shiqi wasn't that simple. In the face of benefits, Duan Chun tacitly agreed. But this time, Ling Shiqi didn't say anything to him and directly took all the credit for himself. This made Duan Chun extremely angry. At this moment, Duan Chun's expression was extremely ugly. However, at this moment, a dark thunder guard ran in and said something in his ear. Bang! Duan Chun smashed the table beside him. He shouted, "How dare you! This Lu Xingji is really reckless and audacious." Yu Zimo was also stunned for a moment, but he was secretly happy. He asked tentatively, "Master Duan, what did that Lu Xingji do this time?" "Humph." Duan Chun snorted. "This person is insatiably greedy. He actually gathered all the patriarchs of the families under his jurisdiction and openly smuggled. Isn't a misty city enough for him to eat? Now he wants to eat 5 cities. Yu Zimo was also shocked. In fact, he also secretly did some smuggling business, but he definitely didn't dare to interfere. If Leng Shiqi succeeded, then he could just lie at home and count money every day. This really made him jealous. "Master Duan, Lu Xingji disregarded the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards and openly smuggled. This is a heinous crime. In my humble opinion, Master Duan can punish him directly." At this moment, Duan Chun suddenly calmed down. He thought carefully. Why was Leng Shiqi so bold? Who gave him such confidence? He faintly felt that there was something fishy. He said in a deep voice, "This is indeed a heinous crime. According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, he should be sentenced to life imprisonment at least. However, Lu Xingji is not stupid. On the contrary, he is very shrewd. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been willing to destroy the Xianyang sect. Since he dares to do this, he must have the confidence. No, I have to ask around first." Duan Chun was so cautious that Yu Zimo couldn't say anything more. However, he still felt indignant. Leng Shiqi was just a kid in the spiritual pulse realm. How could he be the supervisor? How could he get such a big credit for destroying the Xianyang sect? How dare he openly smuggle a large amount of resources? In comparison, Yu Zimo seemed to be a mediocre person. In his opinion, Leng Shiqi was someone who used connections to sneak into the Dark Thunder Guards. He even guessed that someone secretly helped him destroy the Xianyang sect. Otherwise, how could he, a spiritual pulse realm cultivator, kill Li Xianyang and Li Feizhou, 2 spiritual aperture realm cultivators? Yu Zimo secretly harbored hatred in his heart. As for the Leng Shiqi that they were discussing, the patriarchs of the clans in the 5 cities had already been sent away. This banquet went very smoothly. It went so smoothly that Leng Shiqi didn't say much. The whole time, it was Guan Feihong and the people of the 6 great clans who were talking. With the example of the 6 great clans, everyone happily agreed to Leng Shiqi's request. At this point, all the clans in the area under Leng Shiqi's jurisdiction had defected to him. His power in the 5 cities could be said to be unparalleled for a time. However, Leng Shiqi didn't care about this false reputation. After arranging everything, he handed over all the matters of the Dark Thunder Manor to the 5 Dark Thunder envoys. As for himself, he entered a state of seclusion. He fought with Li Xianyang and Li Feizhou, the 2 spiritual aperture realm cultivators. He gained a lot of insights and even saw the path to breaking through to the spiritual aperture realm more clearly. However, he wasn't in a hurry to break through to the spiritual aperture realm because he still had important things to do before leaving. That was to open his spiritual pulse. He had several cultivation methods. Excluding the 10 that he had already opened, he still had 32 spiritual pulses that he could open. As long as he opened these spiritual pulses, his strength would be able to take another step forward. Chapter 343. For Leng Shiqi, who was at the 9th level of the spirit vein realm, opening a spirit vein was not a difficult task. He had many profound techniques and the spirit energy in his body was a mutated gray spirit energy. As long as he controlled it carefully, opening a spirit vein was only a matter of time. Leng Shiqi could open a spirit vein almost every day. If this incredible speed was spread out, no one would believe it. It wasn't until a month later that he had actually opened up the remaining 32 spirit veins. Now, Leng Shiqi had opened up more than 20 spirit veins in his body. The spiritual meridian had a very strong effect on the spirit cultivator. Previously, the 10 spirit veins that Ling Shiqi had opened were all used to amplify spells and illusions. However, he didn't have many spells and their power wasn't particularly strong. Hence, it didn't show. Now that he had opened up the indefinite truth and the ultimate golden mysterious yang arts spirit veins, most of them were gathered in his arms and chest. Whether it was the foundation of his strength or his explosive power, it had greatly increased. In this month, although he did not deliberately cultivate spirit techniques, his strength had greatly improved. It was a pity that opening up spirit veins required full concentration, so he did not use the mind-splitting technique to separate a part of his consciousness to deduce spirit techniques. However, Ling Shiqi was still very satisfied. After a month of closed-door cultivation, he did not have any more spirit veins to open and was ready to go out and take a look. Calculating the time, in these 2 days, the various large families in the cities should have handed over their offerings. He should also go and replenish a large amount of spirit stones. Ling Shiqi had just pushed open the door when he saw Qiu Cheng and Guan Feihong walking in together. Moreover, they both had strange expressions on their faces. Guan Feihong cupped his hands and said, "Master, we are requesting to see you." "En? What happened?" Ling Shiqi was a little surprised. If it was before, there were some matters in Dark Thunder Manor that required him to make decisions. But now, Dark Thunder Manor had sufficient manpower. Furthermore, with Qiu Cheng and Guan Feihong managing it together, it could be said that everything was in order. Now that the two of them came together, something troublesome must have happened. Qiu Cheng said, "Master, the city lord's manor was robbed." Ling Shiqi frowned. "Stolen? Why should we, the Dark Thunder Guards, care about this kind of thing?" Qiu Cheng explained, "Not only the city lord manor, but even the 6 great clans were robbed. The things they stole weren't very precious, but the thief was unusually arrogant. Every time he stole something, he would send a letter to the patriarch to tell him what he was going to steal. In the end, he always succeeded. The first was the Zhong family. The Zhong family's patriarch, Zhong Cheng, didn't take it seriously at first. Sir also knew that this person had always been cautious and had guards all over his residence. But the next day, he found out that his beloved jade had been stolen. From that day onwards, the 6 great clans were robbed one after another. Even the city lord's mansion was robbed last night. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi was finally moved. The city lord's mansion had Sun Gang, an expert at the late stage of the spirit aperture realm. Apart from him, there were also hundreds of city guards. Even with such a lineup, the items could still be stolen. This showed that the thief's ability was not small. Guan Feihong took out a square handkerchief and continued, "Every time this person stole something, he would leave this square handkerchief at the place where he left it. There are a few words written on it. Sir, please take a look." Ling Shiqi took the square handkerchief. From the material in his hands, he could tell that it was an ordinary square handkerchief. However, there were 6 words written on it: "Don't look back on worldly affairs. Don't look back. Great thief, don't look back." Seeing these words, Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows. After he took over as the supervisor, in order to get rid of dissidents, he even used Mo Huaishou's name to transfer Gong Sun Bing's trusted aides. He didn't expect Mo Huaishou to actually appear in Misty Chi City. Guan Feihong said, "This great thief don't look back. According to my estimation, his cultivation is at least at the spirit aperture realm. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to steal from the city lord's mansion without being discovered by Sun Gang." Ling Shiqi nodded. This was the same as what he had expected. However, Ling Shiqi still had some doubts. Even so, the job of catching the thief should belong to the city guards. Moreover, the city lord's mansion was robbed. They should be contributing even more. Qiu Cheng and Guan Feihong looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Guan Feihong took out another piece of paper and said seriously, "This was accidentally found by a servant in the courtyard this morning." Ling Shiqi lowered his head to take a look. There was also a sentence written on it: I would like to borrow the Dark Thunder Mansion's supervisory seal to take a look. Ling Shiqi frowned. Mo Huisho actually had his eyes on him. The supervisory seal was the seal he used to exercise his authority as a supervisor. Mo Huisho actually wanted to steal the supervisory seal. Unconsciously, a cold glint flashed across Ling Shiqi's eyes. At the same time, he understood why Qiu Cheng and Guan Feihong came to find him. Even the heavily guarded city lord's mansion had been robbed. Now that the supervisory seal was targeted, the two of them definitely had no confidence in solving it. How many people are there in Dark Thunder Mansion now? Ling Shiqi asked. Qiu Cheng said, Sir, we've been busy recently. There are only about 40 people in the mansion. Do you want me to urgently transfer some people back? Ling Shiqi's gaze was as sharp as a sword. He said coldly, No need. 40 people are enough. Come closer. The two of them hesitated when they heard Ling Shiqi's words. Just do it. If Mo Huisho dares to come tonight, he won't be able to return. The two of them nodded and went to prepare according to Ling Shiqi's instructions. Meanwhile, Ling Shiqi walked to the meeting hall and began to arrange things. Soon, it was night time. Everything in Dark Thunder Mansion was as usual. The only unusual thing was that a square box was placed on the table in the meeting hall. That box contained the supervisory seal. This action seemed to be purposely giving the supervisory seal to Mo Huisho, but it looked more like a trap. In Dark Thunder Manor, a servant bowed slightly as he walked past the meeting hall with small steps. Soon, he turned into a corridor. That person's eyes immediately lit up, and the corners of his mouth curled up. TSK, there are 30 to 40 hidden sentries in all directions. There are even a few Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators hiding in the meeting hall. What era is it now? You still want to play such a lowly trick? Aren't you underestimating me too much? I didn't say that I had to come tonight to retrieve the supervisory seal. I'll forgive you for a few days first. Immediately after, the figure of this servant quietly disappeared into the darkness. In the blink of an eye, that person directly appeared outside the walls of Dark Thunder Mansion. When he turned around, his servant's appearance actually changed into an elegant young master. He left with his hands behind his back. At the same time, a figure stood on top of the Misty Chi City's city tower. He was the city lord of Misty Chi City, Sun Gang. His gaze was fixed in the direction of Dark Thunder Mansion. He also wanted to know if Dark Thunder Mansion would be robbed tonight. Not long after the elegant young master left, someone blocked his path. It was Ling Shiqi. Chapter 344. When the elegant young master saw Ling Shiqi, he paused for a moment. However, he immediately calmed down and continued walking forward. Don't look back on worldly affairs. Who knew that Ling Shiqi would say this? The elegant young master turned his head in surprise. This young master is rather elegant. It's a pity that it's already late. Otherwise, I would like to recite poems with you. Ling Shiqi smiled coldly. With a wave of his hand, several figures quickly swept past and surrounded the elegant young master. There were also 4 Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators who stood beside him. Mo Huisho, your disguise is indeed exquisite. However, there are many people who are good at it in the Dark Thunder Guards. Do you think that you can hide from the eyes of the Dark Thunder Guards with this little ability of yours? You shouldn't have targeted me in the first place. Ling Shiqi said indifferently. The elegant young master's gaze flickered. He shrugged his shoulders and said, as expected of the Dark Thunder Guards, as expected of the supervisor. You guys actually saw through the flaw. The clumsy arrangement in the Dark Thunder Manor was intentional. It was to lure me out. That's pretty smart. However, so what? Do you think you can keep me here with just these few people? Or do you have the confidence to capture a Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator? Ling Shiqi's brows furrowed. With his strength and a few Dark Thunder Guards, he could indeed barely deal with a Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator at the initial stage. However, being able to fight and being able to capture were two different things. However, just as Lin Shiqi furrowed his brows, Mo Huisho's figure suddenly turned into a phantom and fled. It was as if the dark thunder guards surrounding him didn't exist. They couldn't stop him at all. Oh no! Lin Shiqi knew that things weren't good. He hurriedly shouted, "Chase!" He immediately led everyone to chase after him. However, Mo Huisho's speed was extremely fast. He was the fastest among all the people he had fought. After a while, Mo Huisho turned into a small alley. He smiled proudly. You guys purposely lured me out. However, you didn't know that I was also trying to lure you out. Soon after, a faint black aura rose from his body. When the black aura dissipated, his figure disappeared again. Lin Shiqi quickly arrived with his men, but there was no one in sight. According to common sense, he should be frowning, but now there was a strange smile on his face. He took the bait. Qiu Qing stepped forward. Right now, only Lord and Qin Jianchen are in Dark Thunder Manor. Will there be any problems? Lin Shiqi glanced at him and said, "Are you questioning His Excellency's strength?" Qiu Cheng's face stiffened, and he said with a slightly angry tone, I'm just worried about the safety of my lord." Lin Shiqi did not pay much attention to him. Instead, he turned around and left, leaving behind a sentence, "Then why don't you hurry back and help His Excellency?" Qiu Qing felt a little uncomfortable. He knew that the Lin Shiqi in front of him was not Lin Shiqi, but Qian Ming. In Qiu Cheng's impression, Qian Ming was initially more respectful and modest. However, as he slowly familiarized himself with and gained some power, he gradually did not put Qiu Cheng in his eyes. However, Qian Ming was indeed very skilled. His disguising skills were unparalleled in Dark Thunder Manor. In order to capture Mo Huisho tonight, he played a crucial role. Even though Qiu Cheng was a little dissatisfied with his attitude, he did not dare to cause trouble in case he messed up the plan. He secretly gritted his teeth and followed with his men. At this moment, in Dark Thunder Manor, Lin Shiqi hurriedly walked into the meeting hall. However, his footsteps stopped the moment he entered the hall. He said, "Come out, Mo Huisho has already escaped." A person walked out from the shadows of the meeting hall. He hugged a thin sword. It was Ghost Sword Qin Jianchen. Qin Jianchen had always been a man of few words. He just stood there silently. Lin Shiqi asked, "Is there anything wrong with the supervisory seal?" Qin Jianchen shook his head slightly. Lin Shiqi walked forward and said, "It said that Mo Huisho's methods are strange. It's better to confirm it." As he spoke, he picked up the box containing the supervisory seal as if he wanted to check it. However, the moment he picked up the box, something unexpected happened. He did not hear the sound of a long sword being unsheathed. A thin sword had already stabbed towards Lin Shiqi like a ghost. What a fast sword! Lin Shiqi did not expect Qin Jianchen to suddenly attack. This sword was very fast, so fast that he could not dodge it at all. With a "weng" sound, a huge amount of spiritual power surged out from Lin Shiqi's body and instantly formed a protective spiritual armor. Qin Jianchen's sword looked simple and unadorned, but it hid a terrifying power and killing intent. His sword actually pierced through the protective spiritual armor in an instant. However, the protective spiritual armor had at least bought half a breath of time. Lin Shiqi's body twisted like a snake and narrowly avoided the sword. Qin Jianchen's sword shook and a wave of sword qi with a deathly aura shot out and entered Lin Shiqi's body. Lin Shiqi tapped his feet on the ground and retreated several hundred feet away. He stared at Qin Jianchen in shock. Qin Jianchen's cultivation was only at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm, but his sword was abnormally terrifying. Not only did it easily pierce through his protective spiritual armor, the deathly sword qi was also corroding his flesh like maggots. Qin Jianchen said with a bit of sarcasm, "So my lord has already broken through to the Spirit Aperture realm." Lin Shiqi knew that he had already been exposed when he appeared here, but he did not know how he had been exposed. Everything that happened tonight seemed to be out of his control. At this moment, the ground under his feet suddenly made a ka-ka sound. The ground in the courtyard of Dark Thunder Manor cracked and rays of dazzling golden light shone out from the cracks. Immediately after, a golden sun broke through the ground, as if a sun had risen in the night sky. Rank 5 Spiritual Technique, Bright Sun Mystic Yang Palm. A figure rose up with the sun in his hand. There was a blood mark on his forehead. It was Ling Shiqi. The real Ling Shiqi. The sun was fierce and everything was revealed. The other Ling Shiqi took off the disguise on her body and revealed an exquisite figure. However, this person's face was covered with a mask. This was Mo Huaishou. What was unexpected was that Mo Huaishou was actually a woman. Mo Huaishou would never have thought that Ling Shiqi had been hiding underground for a long time to find an opportunity to give her a fierce attack. Although Ling Shiqi was still at the 9th level of the Spirit Pulse realm, he had already opened up 42 Spirit Pulses. In addition, with the support of several profound techniques and mutated spiritual energy, his attack was not inferior to a Spirit Aperture realm's attack. Mo Huaishou's palm continuously moved and shot out rays of green light. If one looked carefully, the green light was actually filled with small insects. Those small insects looked extremely weak, but each of them could actually swallow the light of the bright sun mystic yang palm. In the blink of an eye, more than half of Ling Shiqi's palm energy was swallowed. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi's heart moved and he said in surprise, "Gu technique. You are from Zhulu country." Chapter 345. As Ling Shiqi had to make a trip to Zhu Road country soon, he took some time to look at the information regarding Zhu Road country and the 6 western region countries. The Gu technique was a peculiar cultivation method unique to the 6 kingdoms of the western region. But among the 6 countries of the western region, Zhulu country was famous for its Gu techniques because there was a Gu god sect in Zhulu country that specialized in cultivating Gu techniques. This Gu god sect was even worshipped as the national religion in Zhu Road country. According to the division of power, it was considered a first-rate power. Therefore, when Ling Shiqi saw Mo Huaishou use the Gu technique, his first reaction was that she was from Zhu Road country. Ling Shiqi roared, "The dynasty strictly forbids spirit cultivators above the spirit aperture realm from the 6 western region countries to enter. Zhu Road country sure has guts. Do you really think there's no one in our dynasty? Do you really think there's no one in the Dark Thunder Guards?" At this moment, he really had the intention to kill. No matter what Mo Huaishou's motive was for coming to Lan Qi City, and no matter how she sneaked in, she had indeed violated the Thunder Flame dynasty's ban. As long as he killed her, he could pin the crime of being a spy, which would be a great contribution. Of course, it would be best if he could capture her alive. However, Ling Shiqi still had some self-awareness. With just him and Qin Jianchen, they did have a chance to kill Mo Huaishou, but it was impossible to capture her alive. Mo Huaishou was also helpless. She was sneak attacked by Ling Shiqi's glorious sun mysterious sun palm and had no choice but to use the spirit-devouring Gu to defend. The spirit-devouring Gu could devour a large amount of spiritual energy in a short period of time and was the nemesis of various spiritual techniques. However, there was a limit to the amount of spiritual energy that each spirit-devouring Gu could withstand. Ling Shiqi's glorious sun mysterious sun palm was at the Great Circle realm. When he used it, it was extremely powerful and was not weaker than the initial stage of the spirit aperture realm. One by one, the spirit-devouring Gu exploded from the huge amount of spiritual energy, but the glorious sun was also quickly fading. Mo Huaishou's heart ached. The spirit-devouring Gu was extremely difficult to cultivate. It could be said that each one was extremely precious, but in the blink of an eye, dozens of them died. What gave her a headache was that she had exposed her identity because of this. From now on, it would be difficult for her to move around the western desolate province. Unbeknownst to her, a pitch-black sword ray quietly pierced towards her. The speed of the sword ray was unimaginably fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived before her. It was Qin Jianchen. Mo Huaishou coldly snorted. 2 balls of dark green light condensed in her hands, which rippled with dense poisonous gas. She clapped her hands together, and 2 balls of green light shot out toward Qin Jianchen and Leng Shiqi respectively. Leng Shiqi shouted, "Retreat!" Qin Jianchen's sword attack came to a halt, and he was forced to retreat. Immediately after, 2 huge explosions resounded in the courtyard of Dark Thunder Manor. It could be heard clearly even from miles away. Qian Ming, Qiu Cheng, and the other 3 Dark Lightning envoys were on their way here. They clearly felt the aura of the explosion. Their bodies paused for a moment as they revealed looks of shock. Then, they sped up even faster. The green light in the courtyard was tyrannical. Violent spiritual energy blasted out, overturning all the houses and floor tiles in the courtyard. From the ashes of the huge explosion, a figure wearing demonic armor walked out. Leng Shiqi had activated the demonic beast blood rune armor at the crucial moment. Even so, cracks began to appear on the armor. It was obvious how terrifying the explosion was. As for Qin Jianchen, although he had retreated in time, the power of the explosion was too great. At this moment, the skin and flesh on his back were rolled up, and there was a faint green light corroding his flesh. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed with a shocking murderous intent. However, when he lifted his foot, he realized that he had stepped on something that was unusually sticky. He lowered his head and saw that the ground was actually covered with spider webs. These spider webs were not very tough, but they were very sticky, making it difficult for people to move. And that Mo Huaishou was long gone. Leng Shiqi frowned. He had put in a lot of effort to set up this trap tonight. Mo Huaishou's disguise was indeed brilliant, and he was not inferior to Thousand Face. However, in Leng Shiqi's eyes, nothing could be hidden. No matter how much you changed your appearance and voice, you could not change the spiritual energy in your body. Leng Shiqi had long memorized the spiritual energy of everyone in Dark Thunder Manor. The moment Mo Huaishou entered Dark Thunder Manor, he already knew. The reason why he did not act rashly was that he also realized that Mo Huaishou had a powerful movement spiritual technique that was similar to teleportation. That was why he created a fake Leng Shiqi show. However, now that he knew that Mo Huaishou was most likely from Zhu Lu country, destroyed Dark Thunder Manor's courtyard, and injured his subordinates, his heart was filled with murderous intent. At this moment, he heard footsteps. It was Guan Feihong and the rest who had returned. Leng Shiqi removed his demonic beast blood rune armor. Guan Feihong ran to the front and asked anxiously, "Sir, are you okay?" Leng Shiqi shook his head and said, "I'm fine." Qin Jianchen, on the other hand, suffered heavy injuries. Quickly take him away for treatment. Use the best resources. The few of them also saw Qin Jianchen's injuries and hurriedly sent people to take him away. Guan Feihong looked at the spider webs and traces of dead spirit devouring parasites on the ground. His expression changed slightly as he asked, "Sir, these seem to be traces of Gu techniques." "That's right." Leng Shiqi nodded and said that Mo Huaishou is proficient in Gu techniques. He is most likely from Zhu Lu country. A spirit aperture realm expert proficient in Gu techniques. Mo Huaishou is most likely from the Gu God sect. Only the Gu God sect can cultivate such a Gu expert. Guan Feihong's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise as he said in a deep voice. Leng Shiqi glanced at Guan Feihong. He seemed to know a lot about the Gu God sect. Xiao Qian took the supervisory seal from the meeting room. He let out a sigh of relief and said, "Sir, the supervisory seal is still here." Leng Shiqi picked up the supervisory seal and carefully looked at it a few times. After confirming that it wasn't swapped, he nodded. The supervisory seal wasn't lost, which meant that he didn't lose his face. If Mo Huaishou really took away the supervisory seal, then he wouldn't be able to face anyone anymore. Of course, he didn't plan to let Mo Huaishou go so easily. However, he thought about it again. He didn't have to fight to the death with Mo Huaishou. His thoughts turned quickly. In the past, Mo Huaishou was probably someone who took pleasure in stealing. After all, she didn't steal anything especially precious. However, now that Lin Shiqi knew that she was from Zhulu country, everything changed. What was Mo Huisho's motive for doing this? Also, he had just ruined Zhulu country's plan to collect large amounts of fine iron, and Mo Huisho came to Lanqi city right after. Was this just a coincidence? Following that, Lin Shiqi said a few words and returned to his room. He also instructed that no one was allowed to disturb him. Then, he activated the Fate skill. Chapter 346. Mo Huisho was like a night elf as she sped through Misty Chi City. What was even stranger was that she would transform into a different person every time she passed by a place. One moment she was a young girl, the next moment she was a young man. If one looked closely, they would realize that she relied on the mask on her face to change her appearance. Soon, Mo Huisho left Misty Chi City without being noticed by all the guards. The reason she came to Misty Chi City was to investigate Jill's collection of iron essence and meet Lin Shiqi at the same time. She wanted to meet this person who single-handedly destroyed the profound Yang sect and ruined Zhu Lugua's plan. Who would have thought that her probing would actually expose her own identity? But in that situation, if she didn't use her gu arts, she would definitely be injured. This was also because Lin Shiqi and Qin Jianqin's abilities were far beyond her expectations. How would she have thought that two people in the spiritual pulse realm would have such powerful abilities? What she needed to do now was to leave the western desolate province before the news spread. Otherwise, once the news of her identity spread, it would be very difficult to leave the Thunder Flame dynasty. But when she passed through the forest several kilometers away from Misty Chi City, she saw red, blue, and yellow lights suddenly blossoming in the sky. A figure walked out of the lights. Mo Huisho's figure stopped abruptly. Her eyes focused. This person was wearing a large black cloak and a mask on his face. There was chaos on the mask. She knew that this person was coming for her, and he didn't come with good intentions. This person was naturally Lin Shiqi, who was wearing his own mask. He activated the Fate skill and locked onto Mo Huisho's aura and figure, directly teleporting over. Mo Huisho saw that Lin Shiqi's cultivation was only in the spiritual pulse realm, so she took the initiative to attack. Her hands moved quickly, and purple poisonous gas rose. Lin Shiqi's white eyes under his mask could clearly see that this wasn't poisonous gas. This was clearly a combination of countless tiny goo worms. If he accidentally inhaled some, the consequences would be unimaginable. He grasped the air in his hand, and a rank 4 spirit sword appeared. Suddenly, hundreds of sword chi surged out like the birth of the sun, sweeping in all directions. The scorching sword chi instantly broke through 80% of the poison gas. This was the rank 4 spiritual skill, Shaoyang sword chi. Mo Huisho was secretly bewildered, but Lin Shiqi pointed with his left hand. With a boom, a blood-red lightning shot out. That blood-colored thunderbolt was actually a perfect fusion of the rich blood chi and the tyrannical power of lightning. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. Mo Huisho was shocked. She shook the bell on her wrist. Instantly, dozens of goo worms of different colors came out of her body and rushed towards the blood-colored lightning. Among these goo worms were the spirit-devouring goo that Lin Shiqi had seen before. In an instant, the blood-red lightning shattered most of the goo worms, but it was blocked by the goo worms in the end. The remaining goo worms continued to fly towards Lin Shiqi. He used his palm as a blade and slashed down. A blazing flame blade slashed out and swallowed the goo worms. At this moment, Lin Shiqi changed his voice and said, Mo Huisho, I have no ill intentions. I'm just here to make a deal with you. Mo Huisho's movements paused. She and Lin Shiqi had only exchanged 2 or 3 moves, and she felt that Lin Shiqi was very difficult to deal with. Furthermore, she saw that Lin Shiqi didn't even use his full strength, but he was still able to fight her to a standstill. This already gave him the right to talk to her as an equal. However, Mo Huisho couldn't help but feel embarrassed and angry. Tonight, she had met Qin Jianqin, Lu Xingji, and this mysterious person in front of her. They were all existences that could fight against Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators while being in the Spirit Pulse Realm. She couldn't help but sigh. The Thunderblaze dynasty was indeed full of talents. On the other hand, her Zhu Lu country was always lacking in talents. She didn't connect Lu Xingji with Leng Shiqi because in the Dark Thunder manner, Leng Shiqi used the Glorious Sun Mysterious Yang Palm, which was a metal elemental technique. However, Leng Shiqi was currently using a fire elemental technique. The two were completely different, so Mo Huishou didn't think that these two people could be the same person. Mo Huishou's thoughts turned rapidly. She didn't have the confidence to kill Leng Shiqi. If she really fought to the death, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. This place was only a few miles away from Misty Chi City, and she was definitely on the Dark Thunder Guard's blacklist. Once someone found her here, she would probably never be able to return. Mo Huishou lowered her voice and said, "Tell me." The corner of Leng Shiqi's mouth lifted slightly under his mask. He had already guessed that Mo Huishou would be like this. He said, "Mo Huishou, now that your identity has been exposed, you should know that the Dark Thunder Guards have a sound transmission array. If there are no accidents, your information should have already spread throughout the entire West Desolate Province. Take advantage of the fact that the Dark Thunder Guards and the various city guards haven't been mobilized yet. This is your last chance to escape from the West Desolate Province. Therefore, with every moment you stay here, your chances of survival will decrease." Mo Huishou knew that Leng Shiqi was not lying, but it still made her feel uncertain. She thought to herself, my identity was only exposed not long ago, how did he know? Could it be that he's a member of the Dark Thunder Guards? Or was he hiding near the Dark Thunder residence just now? However, she didn't have much time to think carefully, so she said even more anxiously, "Then why are you still talking nonsense?" Leng Shiqi laughed secretly. Mo Huishou's state of mind was no longer calm. As long as her state of mind was unstable, she would reveal her flaws. In fact, what he said just now was all a lie. It was true that the Dark Thunder Guards had a sound transmission array, but he didn't expose this matter. He wanted to trick Mo Huishou and gain more benefits. Leng Shiqi put on an unfathomable expression and said, "I can pretend that I didn't see you, and even help you cover up the news and let you leave the West Desolate Province smoothly. Don't doubt my words. My identity is far from what you can imagine. If I say I can do it, then I can do it." Mo Huishou naturally didn't believe everything in her heart, but Leng Shiqi's words did move her a little. She gritted her teeth and said, "Then what do you want?" "Cultivation techniques." Leng Shiqi said these two words. "I'm very interested in your Gu techniques. As long as you give me a few rank 4 cultivation techniques related to Gu techniques, I can guarantee that you can leave the West Desolate Province." Leng Shiqi's words weren't a lie. He was really interested in Gu techniques. Moreover, he had already opened up all the spirit veins that could be opened up, and he urgently needed cultivation techniques to open up the remaining spirit veins. Therefore, he set his sights on Mo Huishou. Mo Huishou chuckled when she heard this. "So you've taken a fancy to my cultivation techniques. Not to mention that cultivation techniques are secrets that can't be passed on, I might as well tell you the truth. My cultivation techniques require the use of Gu worms. Unfortunately, only Zhu Lugua knows how to cultivate Gu worms, so even if I give you the cultivation techniques, you won't be able to cultivate them." Leng Shiqi shook his head. "You don't have to worry about this. You can take your time to think about it. If you drag on for too long, even I won't be able to suppress your information." Chapter 347. You. Mo Huishou was furious, but she couldn't do anything. Leng Shiqi had her in a tight grip. She couldn't kill Leng Shiqi in a short period of time. She could ignore Leng Shiqi and escape, but Leng Shiqi wouldn't let her escape so easily. Moreover, just like what Leng Shiqi said, her information had already spread throughout the Western Desolate Province. The longer she delayed, the stricter the defense at the border would be. Even the city guards and dark lightning guards of each city would be looking for her. By then, she wouldn't be able to escape even if she had wings. However, the cultivation technique she cultivated was a secret technique of the Gu God sect. It couldn't be spread to outsiders. If this matter was spread, she would be taken away by the sect leader to refine Gu. Thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind. Finally, she decided to give it a try. Escape. Mo Huisho's body flashed with green light. Her figure turned into a green light and flew across the night sky. Leng Shiqi snorted coldly as a silver-white cloak suddenly appeared behind him. Using the ghostly spring steps, he transformed into a black and white stream of light and shot out. His speed was slightly faster than Mo Huisho's. The ghostly spring steps was a combination of 3 movement techniques. In terms of rank, it was at least comparable to a 5th-level technique. Coupled with the Holy Silver Deer's Beast Origin Battle Rune, his speed was slightly faster than Mo Huisho, who was at the Spirit Aperture realm. Mo Huisho naturally saw Leng Shiqi chasing after her. She sighed in her heart and stopped. She knew that if Leng Shiqi attacked, he would definitely be able to hold her here. Her plan to escape would be completely ruined. At the same time, she was secretly surprised. The person in front of her was only at the Spirit Pulse realm, but his battle strength was comparable to the Spirit Aperture realm. Even his speed was so terrifying. This person's identity must not be simple. She began to doubt Leng Shiqi's words. Mo Huisho, you still haven't given up? My patience is limited, and so is your time. I don't have time to waste with you. I will only give you 3 breaths of time to consider. After 3 breaths of time, if you do not agree to give me the cultivation method, I will turn around and leave. I will then wait for the news of your execution. Leng Shiqi's voice was as cold as a 1,000-year-old ice cave. Mo Huisho had never met such a difficult person. Although her cultivation was high, she was not confident that she could kill Leng Shiqi in a short period of time. Even if she ran away, her speed was not as fast as Leng Shiqi. She would still be trapped here. Her only choice now was to make a deal. Mo Huisho couldn't help but feel a little anxious. However, she recalled what Leng Shiqi had said before. She rolled her eyes and said, I promise you. However, she suddenly changed the topic. However, how can I trust you? Leng Shiqi said coldly, you are still wasting time. If you don't trust me, we can go our separate ways. Mo Huisho was obviously not satisfied with such an answer. Her eyes hidden under the mask kept flickering, as if she was hesitating whether to trust Leng Shiqi or not. Finally, she made up her mind and said, good, you are very good. I will give you the cultivation method. Then, Mo Huisho took out a few handkerchiefs. She quickly wrote dense and delicate words on them and threw them to Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi took the handkerchiefs and a system prompt appeared in front of his eyes. Discovered Level 4 Cultivation Method 10,000 Gu Spirit Devouring Technique, incomplete. Do you want to learn it? No. Seeing this prompt, Leng Shiqi knew that the cultivation method was not fake. However, this cultivation method was incomplete, which made him unhappy. He said in a low voice, this cultivation method is not complete. Mo Huisho laughed. You said it yourself that you only want a level 4 cultivation method. My cultivation method is far beyond level 4. Even if I only gave you the first 2 levels, it is comparable to a level 4 cultivation method. Now that I have given you the cultivation method, you won't go back on your words, right? Mo Huisho thought to herself. Although this 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique was forbidden to be spread, she only gave out the first 2 levels. Moreover, this cultivation method could only be practiced with Gu worms. Even if she gave it to him, he would not be able to practice it. Leng Shiqi laughed secretly. Mo Huisho actually caught the small loophole in his words. He also retorted, that is true, but I am talking about a few level 4 cultivation methods. If you only gave me the incomplete cultivation method, this one is not enough. Don't be greedy. Mo Huisho was also angered by his words. Leng Shiqi said sarcastically, you even gave me this kind of legacy cultivation method. What are some ordinary level 4 cultivation methods worth? I am purely curious about the cultivation method system of the 6 nations of the West and want to learn by analogy. As long as you give me 2 more level 4 cultivation methods, I will immediately arrange them for you. Mo Huisho immediately said in a low voice, "You think level 4 cultivation methods are vegetables by the roadside?" Ling Shiqi shrugged. "If you really can't, level 4 spiritual techniques are barely enough." Mo Huisho heard this and thought of something. She took out the square handkerchief and started writing again. This action was a tacit approval of her choice. However, Ling Shiqi was very curious. How many handkerchiefs did this Mo Huisho bring with her? Take them. Mo Huisho threw a few handkerchiefs in annoyance. Discovered level 4 spiritual technique Imperial Gu demonic sound. Do you want to learn it? Discovered level 4 spiritual technique Gu spirit spider web. Do you want to learn it? Ling Shiqi fell into silence after receiving these 2 spiritual techniques. Mo Huisho sneered inwardly. These 2 spiritual techniques were genuine level 4 spiritual techniques, but ordinary spirit cultivators couldn't cultivate them at all. Imperial Gu demonic sound was a spiritual technique that could control a large number of Gu worms. However, this Thunderfire dynasty didn't even have any Gu worms, so how could she control them? As for Gu spirit spider web, it was the spiritual technique she used to stop Ling Shiqi from chasing after her in Dark Thunder manner. Although this spiritual technique didn't rely on Gu worms, it required one to cultivate 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique to use it. In her opinion, it was impossible for Ling Shiqi to cultivate the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique, so this Gu spirit spider web was also a useless spiritual technique. Thinking of this, Mo Huisho proudly raised her head. Actually, the reason why Ling Shiqi was silent was because he really wanted these 2 spiritual techniques. Although the Imperial Gu demonic sound couldn't be used now, he would be going to Zhulu country soon. At that time, he could think of ways to get some Gu worms and use them. On the other hand, the spirit venom spiderweb was a spiritual technique with a strong binding ability that Ling Shiqi currently lacked. He had personally experienced how difficult it was to deal with this spiritual technique. It could be said that he was very satisfied with these 2 spiritual techniques. However, he still pretended to be sullen and said angrily, "You really know how to take advantage of loopholes. Fine, I'll accept this small loss. You can leave now. I can help you fight for half a day at most. As for the rest of the day, you can count on yourself." After speaking, a black aura rose around him and his figure disappeared under the cover of the black aura. Chapter 348. When Mo Huisho saw Ling Shiqi leave so straightforwardly, she was also slightly surprised. It seems that this person is somewhat trustworthy, but I don't know if he has the ability to buy time for me. If it's true, half a day is enough. Then, Mo Huisho thought of Ling Shiqi's deflated look before he left. She was secretly happy and left at her fastest speed. As for Ling Shiqi, he quietly returned to his room and called Qiu Cheng over. Qiu Cheng was still sending people to clean up the devastated courtyard. Now that he was suddenly called over by Ling Shiqi, his head was full of question marks. "Sir, what orders do you have?" Ling Shiqi lightly said, "Don't spread the news that Mo Huisho is from Zhu Road country. Wait until tomorrow morning to inform the headquarters of Shihuang province." Yes. Qiu Cheng knew that this was somewhat against the rules. Since Mo Huisho's identity was exposed, they should quickly spread the news throughout Shihuang province and capture her before she returned to Zhu Road country. But since Ling Shiqi said so, he must have his reasons. Qiu Cheng could only obey. Go. Ling Shiqi waved his hand. Qiu Cheng bowed and retreated. Ling Shiqi's lips curled up slightly. Tonight, he had earned a rank 4 cultivation technique and 2 rank 4 spiritual skills for free. It could be said that his harvest was not small. As for why he let Mo Huisho go, it was naturally because there was a use for her. After some time, he would be going to Zhu Road country. This was a rare opportunity, so he planned to use this opportunity to get more goo worms. Although goo techniques were a small path, they were unpredictable and hard to guard against. If used well, they could be a trump card. For example, the mind-controlling goo could secretly control a person's thoughts. Another example was the spirit-devouring goo, which could devour spirit energy and was the nemesis of various spiritual skills. Thus, goo techniques could not be underestimated. However, Lin Shiqi was going to Zhu Road country as a Dark Thunder Guard, so he probably did not have many opportunities to come into contact with goo worms. And the reason he let Mo Huaishou go back was to use her as a channel to collect goo worms. Lin Shiqi had already memorized Mo Huaishou's spiritual aura. As long as Mo Huaishou appeared near him, he would immediately recognize him. That Mo Huaishou's cultivation was at the spirit aperture realm. Lin Shiqi believed that there were not many women who had reached the spirit aperture realm in Zhulu country. He only needed to ask around to find out Mo Huaishou's true identity. At that time, he only needed to use the excuse of Mo Huaishou secretly imparting a cultivation technique to restrain Mo Huaishou and make her get some goo worms. Then, everything would become simple. Therefore, he chose to release Mo Huaishou. He was treating Mo Huaishou like a leak. It was laughable that Mo Huaishou had thought that he could use a few techniques and spiritual techniques that others could not cultivate to fool Lin Shiqi. Little did she know that Lin Shiqi had started to plot against her the moment she took out the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. Then, Lin Shiqi took out the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, imperial goo demonic sound, and goo spirit spider web to cultivate. What surprised him was that the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique could be considered a very obscure cultivation technique. Out of the 9 spirit veins that it needed to open, only one was already opened by Lin Shiqi. In other words, Lin Shiqi could now open another 8 spirit veins. This made him feel that tonight's plan was too profitable. On the second day, the news that the Dark Thunder Manor's supervisory seal was not lost spread throughout Lanqi City. This made those who came to watch the show a little disappointed. Of course, what they wanted to see the most was Dark Thunder Manor being defeated. However, this also showed how unfathomable Dark Thunder Manor was. Even a great bandit like Mo Huaishou was defeated by Dark Thunder Manor. It could be seen that Dark Thunder Manor was a scourge. In addition, there would be no harm if there was no comparison. Everyone's topic of discussion shifted to the comparison between the City Lord's Manor and Dark Thunder Manor. Look at the City Lord's Manor, there were hundreds of city guards and a city lord who was in the late stage of the spirit aperture realm, but it was still stolen. On the other hand, Dark Thunder Manor only had a few dozen Dark Thunder Guards, and none of them were in the spirit aperture realm. Even so, Mo Huaishou was not able to succeed. Under such a comparison, Dark Thunder Manor's reputation seemed to have overshadowed the City Lord's Manor. Sun Gang's expression was unsightly, but he didn't care too much about this. He was more concerned about Mo Huaishou's identity. Early in the morning, he received information from Lin Shiqi that Mo Huaishou was a spy from Zhulu country. A spy from Zhulu country actually entered his city lord's manor as if there was no one there. This was simply a disgrace. It was his dereliction of duty. Catching spies was the Dark Thunder Guard's job, but this spy committed crimes in Lanqi City, which was under Sun Gang's jurisdiction. This was his responsibility. Although the higher-ups didn't blame him, Sun Gang's heart still felt stifled. At the same time, he really wanted to know how Lin Shiqi found out about Mo Huaishou's identity. As for the Lin Shiqi that these people were talking about, he didn't care about the outside world and only cared about his own cultivation. On the path of cultivation, he couldn't relax at all. Because he had already opened up 42 spirit veins previously, he had a lot of experience. Thus, this time, he only used 5 days to open up the additional 8 spirit veins of the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. At this point, he already had 50 spirit veins on him. Just in this aspect, no one could compare to him. But his goal was to open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Unfortunately, he didn't have any extra rank 4 cultivation techniques on hand, so he had to think of a way to get some rank 4 cultivation techniques. Actually, he also had an expectation in his heart, and that was, why hadn't his reward arrived yet? He had uprooted the Xianyang sect along with a few other clans. The reward for such a great contribution should be very generous, and there might even be a cultivation technique inside. But counting the time, more than a month had passed, and there was still no news from the higher-ups. Not only was there no news about the reward, but there was also no news about the matter of going to Zhu Road Country. Since they were going to Zhu Road Country to ask for an explanation, shouldn't they take advantage of the fact that the matter had just happened to save them? Of course, these were all problems that the higher-ups were considering. He couldn't care less even if he wanted to. Since the reward didn't arrive, he could only turn his attention to other people. What he needed the most now was a rank 4 cultivation technique, but rank 4 cultivation techniques were exceptionally precious. Also, there were requirements for the rank 4 cultivation technique that he wanted. That was, the spirit veins that needed to be opened up in the cultivation technique couldn't be the same as the ones that he had already opened. Ling Shiqi had already opened up 50 spirit veins. If he didn't want it to be the same, the requirements for the cultivation technique were extremely strict. Especially since there were still many spirit veins in his legs that hadn't been opened up, so what he needed the most was a cultivation technique that was good at speed. Ling Shiqi's eyes flickered, and he suddenly thought of someone. After a while, he called a dark lightning guard and ordered, "Go and call the Zhong clan's clan head Zhongqing over." He prepared to harvest leeks again. Chapter 349. Zhongqing was brought to Dark Thunder Manor. Along the way, his heart was jumping up and down. He couldn't guess why Ling Shiqi called him here, and he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. He also knew about Imo Huaishou's failure in Dark Thunder Manor. Even a Spirit Aperture Realm bandit was defeated by Ling Shiqi. It could be seen that his methods were getting more and more powerful. Zhongqing walked into the meeting hall and saw Ling Shiqi sitting on the main seat. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings to Lord Supervisor." It could be said that he lowered his status to the lowest. "Sit," Ling Shiqi said indifferently. The reason he called Zhongqing here was naturally because he was interested in the Zhong family's cultivation technique. The patriarchs of the 6 great families in Mist Chi City were all at the Spirit Pulse realm. Without a cultivation technique of rank 4 or above, it was impossible for them to cultivate to this realm. Therefore, Ling Shiqi planned to obtain the cultivation techniques of the 6 great families. The cultivation techniques of the 6 great families might not be that profound, but Ling Shiqi didn't care about how powerful the cultivation technique was, but how many spirit pulses it could open. And the Zhong family's cultivation technique was one that specialized in speed. This wasn't a secret, and the Dark Thunder Guard's information was very clear. Zhongqing sat down anxiously. When he first saw Ling Shiqi, he was keenly aware that something bad was going to happen today. Therefore, he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. However, he still smiled and said, "Lord Lu, if there's anything, just tell me." Ling Shiqi smiled. "Today, I called Patriarch Zhong here to discuss the Tao of Spirit Cultivation." Discuss the Tao of Spirit Cultivation? Zhongqing was confused. What was this about? Seeing Zhongqing's confused expression, Ling Shiqi knocked on the chair and said, "I heard that Patriarch Zhong's light feather gale record is quite mysterious. Those who successfully cultivate it will be as fast as the wind and as light as a feather. I wonder if that's true." When he heard Ling Shiqi mention his family's cultivation method, Zhongqing's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about this. He secretly swallowed his saliva and laughed dryly. Really? If that's the case, then it's easy." Ling Shiqi suddenly clapped his hands. At this time, Qin Jianchen expressionlessly walked in with his sword. Qin Jianchen's injuries were mostly healed after a few days of recuperation. He glared at Zhongqing the moment he walked in. Qin Jianchen was the Blood Cloak assassin of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Many people had died in his hands. Being stared at like this, Zhongqing suddenly felt a chill coming from his tailbone and going up his spine, making him shudder. He could even sense that this person could kill him with a single strike of the sword. Zhongqing trembled and said, My lord, what do you mean? I have never done anything to let you down. Lin Shiqi said indifferently, Oh, it's nothing. It's just that this envoy wants to see the Zhong family's light feather storm record. Coincidentally, this envoy's subordinate, Dark Lightning Envoy Qin Jianchen, is also proficient in speed. You can compare notes with him. Hearing Lin Shiqi's words, with Zhongcheng's shrewdness, he immediately knew what Lin Shiqi wanted. He actually wanted the light feather storm record. Zhongcheng's heart was filled with bewilderment. This cultivation method was the foundation of their Zhong family. He absolutely could not casually leak it out. However, he couldn't help but have some doubts. In his opinion, Lin Shiqi's cultivation was improving at a rapid pace. Furthermore, his battle strength was also very strong. He was able to kill someone at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm when he was at the middle stage of the Spirit Pulse realm. At the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm, he was actually able to stall the Spirit Aperture realm Li Feizhou. Such a person definitely had a very high-level cultivation method. How could he possibly be interested in the light feather storm record of his family? Zhongqing was bewildered, but he quickly understood that Lin Shiqi didn't call him over to discuss this matter with him. If he didn't agree, he probably wouldn't be able to walk out of this door. Zhongqing made his decision in a breath's time. He stood up and said, Why is Lord Lu so troublesome? Why don't I offer the light feather storm record? Lord Lu can slowly comprehend it. This isn't too good. Lin Shiqi's face showed some hesitation when he heard this. In reality, his evaluation of Zhongqing rose a bit. Although this person was greedy for life and afraid of death, he had a vision and decisiveness that ordinary people couldn't hope to reach. Zhongqing smiled and said, Lord Lu is too polite. If it weren't for Lord Lu, how could the Zhong family have its current glory? Not to mention the light feather storm record, even if it was the entire Zhong family, it would be worth it. Since the Zhong family head is so enthusiastic, I can't refuse. I'll accept this light feather storm record. Lin Shiqi revealed a smile on his face. How about this, I'll make the decision. The Zhong family can send a spirit transformation realm cultivator to join the Dark Thunder Guard. However, this person must have some ability. My Dark Thunder Guard doesn't accept trash. Hiss. Zhongqing was secretly shocked when he heard this. Join the Dark Thunder Guard. His Zhong family could join the Dark Thunder Guard. What did this mean? This meant that his Zhong family and the Dark Thunder Guard were one family. He could be considered to have completely boarded the Dark Thunder Guard's ship. Zhongqing felt that exchanging a cultivation method for the long-term development of the Zhong family was definitely worth it. He quickly bowed and said, Many thanks for Lord Lu's kindness. Please rest assured that this little one will carefully select the family's disciples. Lin Shiqi waved his hand and Qin Jianchen understood and retreated. Zhongqing took a pen and paper and wrote down the cultivation method of the light feather storm record. Rank 4 cultivation method light feather storm record discovered. Do you want to learn it? Seeing this prompt, Lin Shiqi gently smiled and said, The Zhong family head is still sensible. By the way, I still have a few guests coming later. They are all people that the Zhong family head knows. You can meet them here. Zhongcheng's eyelids twitched when he heard this. He immediately guessed who the other guests Lin Shiqi was talking about were. It must be the family heads of the other 5 families. It turned out that not only did Lin Shiqi want his Zhong family's cultivation method, but he also wanted the cultivation methods of the other 5 families. After this, the other 5 family heads came one after another. Under Lin Shiqi's coercion and Zhongcheng's example, they had no choice but to hand over their family's cultivation methods. In the same way, Lin Shiqi also promised that they could send a disciple to join the Dark Thunder Guard, which was not a bad treatment. Overall, things went very smoothly. After he sent everyone away, Lin Shiqi immediately returned to his room to prepare to cultivate and open up his spiritual veins. To his surprise, the Zhong family's light feather storm record could open up an additional 6 spiritual veins. It was a pity that the other 5 cultivation methods were rather ordinary. These 5 cultivation methods only added up to 10 more spiritual veins. However, Lin Shiqi was very satisfied. As long as he opened up all the spiritual veins of the 6 cultivation methods, he would have 66 spiritual veins. Chapter 350. Not long after, Lin Shiqi had just opened the 6th spirit vein of the light feather gale record when he received a message from the Western Desolate Province headquarters asking him to make a trip there as soon as possible. The message mentioned that he was going to the Western Desolate Province for 2 things. One was that he had received his reward, and the other was that he was preparing to leave for Zhu Road country. Lin Shiqi didn't expect these 2 things to happen at the same time, but it was good, it saved him the trouble of making 2 trips. Then, he called the 5 Dark Lightning envoys to the conference hall. I'm going to the Western Desolate Province immediately, and then I'll follow Inspector Yu to Zhu Road country. I'm not sure when I'll return, so you guys will be in charge of Dark Lightning Manor for the time being. Lin Shiqi called them over to arrange everything. He said, Qiu Cheng, you'll still be in charge of intelligence, and Xiao Qian will continue to manage the Dark Lightning Guards. Qian Ming, you'll be in charge of handing over missions. As for Qin Jianchen, you just need to keep all the troublemakers under control. Qiu Cheng and Xiao Qian were still in their original positions, and Qian Ming was in charge of managing missions when he was disguised as Pang Yuan, so it was natural for him to do it. Qin Jianchen wasn't good at communicating with people, so he wasn't suited to manage Dark Lightning Manor. Of course, Lin Shiqi didn't transfer him from the Blood Garment Pavilion to manage things. Instead, he was interested in his battle strength. After Lin Shiqi left Mist City, it was unknown how long it would take for him to return, so it was inevitable that some troublemakers would come out to cause trouble. With Qin Jianchen here, he could leave without worry. Everyone nodded in agreement, but Qin Jianchen didn't say anything, but everyone was already used to it. At this time, Guan Feihong spoke, Sir, what about me? Among them, Lin Shiqi didn't mention Guan Feihong. He didn't want to fight for power, but he couldn't just sit around and bask in the sun every day. Lin Shiqi turned to look at him and said, You'll come with me to Zhu Road country. Yu Ruifeng had sent a message saying that he could bring a subordinate with him. The reason why he chose Guan Feihong was because Guan Feihong was at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm and could be considered a decent fighter. Secondly, Lin Shiqi always felt that Guan Feihong seemed to know a lot about the Gu God sect. Taking him to Zhu Lu country might be able to collect the Gu worms more smoothly. Guan Feihong's eyes flashed as he lowered his head and said, Yes. As for Qiu Cheng, Xiao Qian and the others, they all looked at him enviously. Being brought to Zhu Road by Lin Shiqi was not only a golden opportunity, but the trust they had in him was enough to make them envious. After arranging these matters, Lin Shiqi didn't delay any further. After simply packing up, he brought Guan Feihong to Western Desolation City. This time, because he was bringing people with him, he didn't use the fate skill to hasten his journey. He could only ride a spirit horse for 4 days before finally arriving at the Western Desolated City. But to Lin Shiqi's surprise, he bumped into Yu Ruifeng the moment he stepped into Dark Thunder Manor's headquarters. Yu Ruifeng seemed to have been waiting for Lin Shiqi. When he saw him arrive, he approached him with an anxious expression and said, Follow me first. Lin Shiqi indicated for Guan Feihong to wait here for a moment. He followed Yu Ruifeng to a side room with doubts in his heart. Yu Ruifeng said with a serious expression, Your reward has arrived, but you must be careful of the person who delivered it. Who is it? Lin Shiqi was surprised to see Yu Ruifeng so serious. This was the first time he saw Yu Ruifeng like this. Moreover, did they need someone to deliver the reward? Couldn't they just send someone else? From Yu Ruifeng's words, this person wasn't simple at all. Even a high-ranking inspector like him seemed to be wary of this person. Yu Ruifeng said, The person who came is Eunuch Gao, one of the Dark Thunder Manor's supervisors. He is also His Majesty's trusted aide. His short sentence immediately caused Lin Shiqi's pupils to shrink. Although he did not know much about Dynasty's internal affairs, especially what happened in the Supreme Palace, he had at least some common sense. This eunuch Gao was one of His Majesty's most trusted people. He was also one of the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Manor and was in charge of supervising the 8 western counties of the Thunderblaze dynasty. It could be said that this person was his direct superior. This was an important person who could reach the heavens. However, eunuch Gao had always been by His Majesty's side. Why would he appear in the western desolate province? Yu Ruifeng continued, eunuch Gao came here secretly. This matter cannot be revealed to anyone else. Otherwise, you and I won't be able to keep our heads. When you see eunuch Gao later, put away all your thoughts. Whatever he says, you just have to agree. Do you understand? Lin Shiqi felt that Yu Ruifeng's words didn't just contain fear towards eunuch Gao, but also a bit of fear. However, he thought about it again. As the saying goes, accompanying a ruler is like accompanying a tiger. Since eunuch Gao was able to accompany His Majesty, he must be someone with profound means. Eunuch Gao has waited long enough. Quickly go to the main hall to see him. Oh right, don't mention anything about us. However, if eunuch Gao asks, you must report truthfully. This subordinate understands. Lin Shiqi cupped his hands and left the side room. He turned towards the main hall. When he took a step into the main hall, he immediately felt that the room was filled with cold air. This kind of cold air wasn't ice cold, but cold. In his eyes, a beardless old man was sitting on a chair. He looked very old. The wrinkles on his face were like ravines, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. This was eunuch Gao. Lin Shiqi knew that eunuch Gao's cultivation was at the unity of heaven and man realm, the same as Yu Ruifeng. However, he had a faint feeling that if eunuch Gao and Yu Ruifeng were to fight, Yu Ruifeng would probably be killed within a few moves. He had only felt this kind of invisible aura from eunuch Gao from his master Wu Xiang. After Lin Shiqi entered, he only glanced at eunuch Gao before lowering his head. He respectfully said, "This subordinate, Lu Xingji, greets Steward Gao." "Sit." Eunuch Gao's voice sounded hoarse and sharp. It was very uncomfortable to listen to. Lin Shiqi originally wanted to be polite, but when he thought of Yu Ruifeng's instructions, he bowed again and sat down. Eunuch Gao's eyes swept over Lin Shiqi. His eyes became unusually bright. Heroes indeed come from the young. Lin Shiqi felt that eunuch Gao's gaze was about to see through him. When he heard eunuch Gao's words, he didn't know if eunuch Gao was talking about the destruction of Profound Yang's sect or if eunuch Gao had seen through him. He humbly said, "Steward Gao is overpraising this subordinate." Eunuch Gao expressionlessly said, "You used your spiritual pulse cultivation to destroy Profound Yang's sect and Zhu Lu country's conspiracy. You are worthy of such praise. I've also brought you the reward you deserve on this trip. There are 2 rewards in total. First, I have fought for a spot for you. A spot to represent the entire Western Desolate Province in this event." Hearing this, Lin Shiqi was confused. Wasn't this just painting a pie in the sky? From eunuch Gao's words, it seemed like a very rare spot. However, compared to a castle in the sky, eunuch Gao preferred a real reward. However, he didn't show any expression on his face. "Second, I can agree to one of your requests." Hearing this, Lin Shiqi's heart suddenly moved. Chapter 351. What did Lin Shiqi want the most? Of course, what he wanted the most was a cultivation method. Right now, he only lacked 6 spirit meridians to open up all the spirit meridians in his body. However, these 6 spirit meridians were very impractical, and almost no cultivation method would open them up. Therefore, he needed a very obscure cultivation method. Thinking of this, Lin Shiqi cautiously said, "Steward Gao, this humble servant wants a cultivation method of level 4 or above. It would be best if it was a very strange cultivation method." Hearing Lin Shiqi's request, eunuch Gao revealed a look of interest. He stared at Lin Shiqi for a few breaths of time, then suddenly laughed. However, his laughter was abnormally unpleasant to the ears, and even a bit piercing, making people feel uncomfortable. This request is rare, but you've asked the right person. I do have a strange cultivation method here, but I don't know if you dare to cultivate it. Eunuch Gao threw out a jade slip half the size of a palm. Lin Shiqi was a bit confused when he caught it. Send your mental power into it. Lin Shiqi's mind moved, and his mental power surged into the jade slip. Then, he suddenly saw sinister words in his mind. Cold Nether Treasure Manual. This jade slip recorded a cultivation method, and it was a level 5 cultivation method. If a level 4 cultivation method was enough to support a large family, then a level 5 cultivation method was enough to support a spirit cultivation sect. Eunuch Gao was actually giving him a level 5 cultivation method. Lin Shiqi couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. This cultivation method was personally created by me, and there has never been a successor. You are the first. Eunuch Gao's voice sounded, and Lin Shiqi withdrew his mental power. Hearing this, Lin Shiqi instantly thought of a famous cultivation method created by a eunuch in his previous life. Combined with what Eunuch Gao just said, he might not dare to cultivate it. Lin Shiqi suddenly felt a cold breeze under his chair. This cultivation method, could it be that only eunuchs could practice it? Eunuch Gao continued, the cold nether scripture is a cultivation method that my family created for my children. Although you can cultivate it without cleansing your body, if you forcefully cultivate it, it will cause an imbalance in your yin and yang. Do you want this reward or not? Eunuch Gao had already explained a lot for Lin Shiqi. Even if Lin Shiqi didn't want to, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He stood up and cupped his fists. Thank you for your reward, Steward Gao. Eunuch Gao raised a sinister smile. Good, when we reach Zhulu country, don't lose face for my imperial court. Lin Shiqi knew that Eunuch Gao was asking him to leave. He nodded and took 2 steps back before turning to leave. Eunuch Gao looked at Lin Shiqi's departing figure with a meaningful look in his eyes. When Lin Shiqi came out of the main hall, he saw Yu Ruifeng give him a look in the distance. He immediately walked over. What did Eunuch Gao ask you? Yu Ruifeng seemed to ask anxiously. But Lin Shiqi frowned inwardly. He answered, Eunuch Gao didn't ask anything. Really? How would this subordinate dare to deceive Lord Yu? Ha! Yu Ruifeng raised his head and smiled. How can I not believe virtuous nephew's words? Right, virtuous nephew, can you tell me what reward Eunuch Gao gave you? Don't misunderstand, I'm just curious. Lin Shiqi sneered inwardly. This Yu Ruifeng probably wanted a share of the pie. But he had nothing to hide and wanted Yu Ruifeng to explain. So he said, Eunuch Gao gave me a cultivation method and a spot, nothing else. At this point, Lin Shiqi deliberately lowered his voice. Martial uncle, isn't this Eunuch Gao too stingy? He sent me away with a cultivation method. But when Yu Ruifeng heard the word, spot, his eyes widened. He was a dignified inspector of the Western Wilderness Dark Thunder Guard, a person with real power. Yet he revealed such a shocked expression. Yu Ruifeng murmured, spot. Is it really that spot? Virtuous nephew, what was Eunuch Gao's exact words? When Lin Shiqi saw Yu Ruifeng making a fuss over nothing, he knew that the quota was extremely precious, so he repeated Eunuch Gao's words to him. Yu Ruifeng nodded. It can't be wrong, it can't be wrong. Virtuous nephew, you're really lucky. Eunuch Gao wants to nurture you greatly. But Lin Shiqi was still confused. Martial uncle, what exactly is that spot? This matter hasn't been completely decided yet, so I can't reveal it to you. But you have to know that your spot is the only one in the entire Western Wilderness Dark Thunder Guard. You can imagine how precious this spot is. In my original plan, after returning from Zhulu, I was going to select some people to compete for this spot. But now that Eunuch Gao has spoken, it's yours. It saves me a lot of effort. Lin Shiqi understood half of it. This spot was obviously very rare. Now that he was directly appointed, it was a great reward. But unfortunately, he still didn't know what this spot was for. Since Yu Ruifeng didn't say, he couldn't ask. He could only wait patiently. And after Yu Ruifeng confirmed this matter, his words and actions towards Leng Shiqi became more enthusiastic. He pulled him to chat, as if they were really uncle and nephew. After a long time, Yu Ruifeng said, "Virtuous nephew, it's getting late. You should go rest first. Tomorrow we'll prepare to leave for Zhulu." "Okay, Martial nephew will take his leave. Come, take virtuous nephew Lu to the east courtyard." Yu Ruifeng immediately called out. The two servants immediately led Leng Shiqi away. At the same time, they were secretly surprised. The east courtyard was a place where only distinguished guests could live. Generally speaking, Yu Ruifeng would only arrange for distinguished guests of similar status to him to live in the east courtyard. After settling down in the east courtyard, Leng Shiqi locked himself in his room and took out the jade slip that eunuch Gao had given him. Leng Shiqi did some calculations. In these few short days, he had actually collected as many as 8 fourth-tier and above cultivation techniques. And it even included a rank 5 cultivation method. In the past, Leng Shiqi definitely wouldn't have dared to think about this. This was the benefit of status and strength. It was no wonder that many people were obsessed with these things their whole life. However, Leng Shiqi didn't care very much. Next, he began to concentrate on cultivating the Cold Nether Scripture and the 2 accompanying spiritual skills, Cold Nether Palm and Cold Nether Hand. These 2 spiritual skills were both rank 5 spiritual skills. What surprised him even more was that this Cold Nether Scripture was indeed very different from ordinary cultivation methods. It just happened to be able to open up his remaining 6 spirit veins. This also meant that as long as he cultivated for a certain amount of time, he could open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Chapter 352. After a night of hard work, Leng Shiqi finally opened up another spirit vein. The next morning, their delegation of more than 20 people set off for Zhulu country. Although they were called a delegation, they had neither the honor nor the equipment of a delegation. These people included Inspector Yu Ruifeng, Supervisor Yuan Song who was in charge of the South County, and Leng Shiqi, as well as the accompanying guards. Even the weakest of the guards were at the spiritual pulse realm. There were several masters in the gang spirit realm. Leng Shiqi only brought Guan Feihong, Yuan Song brought 5 subordinates, and Yu Ruifeng brought more than a dozen people. And there was a very special person among these people, that was Jill. This witness had been kept by Leng Shiqi so that when they arrived at Zhulu country, he could testify in person. Because there weren't many of them, each of them rode on a spirit horse and rushed towards Zhulu country at top speed. There was only a grassland and a few military towns between the West Baron Prefecture and Zhulu country. There was no difficult road, so it only took them nearly 10 days to arrive at Zhulu country. As soon as they entered Zhulu country, Leng Shiqi not only saw many people dressed up in the west regions, but also saw various strange buildings that could not be seen in the imperial court. It was an eye-opener. There were no prefectures in Zhulu country because the entire Zhulu country was not as big as the West Baron Prefecture. So there were only dozens of cities in Zhulu country. Leng Shiqi and his group went straight into the imperial city of Zhulu country. At this moment, at the gate of the imperial city, the prince of Zhulu country, Prince Gus, received them. Prince Gus looked to be in his 40s or 50s. His body was a little weak, and he looked a bit like a scholar. Prince Gus said in an awkward accent, "Welcome, special envoys from your country. Please come with me to the post house to rest." On the way here, Yu Ruifeng had already given the information of the high level of Zhulu country to Leng Shiqi. Zhulu country was naturally led by its king, but internally, it was divided into 2 major factions, the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction. The peacemaking faction was basically made up of the old officials of Zhulu country. They were led by the current state elders and state preceptor. The state preceptor was the leader of the Gu God sect, which was the state religion of Zhulu country. The other pro-war faction was led by 2 princes, and Prince Gus was one of them. Zhulu country sending a prince to greet the envoy was giving Yu Ruifeng enough face, but Yu Ruifeng kept a straight face and didn't give Prince Gus any face. He knew why they were here. They were here to denounce him. Moreover, the smuggling of refined iron was obviously for the sake of war, and it was most likely instigated by the pro-war Prince Gus. The group followed Prince Gus to the post house next to the palace. After Yu Ruifeng sent Prince Gus away, he immediately called Yuan Song and Leng Shiqi over. Yu Ruifeng said, "Tomorrow, come with me to see Zhulu country's king, He Dang. Remember, no one in Zhulu is worthy of our respect, so even if you see the king, you have to straighten your backs. This is the power of our Thunderfire dynasty." Leng Shiqi and Yuan Song nodded. Yu Ruifeng looked at Leng Shiqi and said, "Tomorrow, go to the palace with that Jill. Also, bring all the evidence on you. With the witnesses and evidence, they can't deny it. However, the two of you shouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary. After all, this is a negotiation between two countries. Any slip of the tongue will be magnified. This subordinate understands." Leng Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "Well, since we're already here, there's no harm in telling you some things." Yu Ruifeng's face became serious. "Although we say we're here to denounce them, you should know the dynasty's intentions. They won't tear apart all pretense of cordiality with Zhulu country. Therefore, we can only try to get as many benefits as possible. The more benefits we get, the more credit we will get. Also, we have another mission." Leng Shiqi's face showed a confused expression, but he already guessed it. Of course, a big shot like Eunuch Gao wouldn't appear in the western wilderness just to give him a reward. At most, it was on the way. The time he came to the western wilderness coincided with the time he went to Zhulu country. Leng Shiqi wouldn't believe that there wasn't a connection between the two. At that time, he guessed that this trip to Zhulu country wasn't as simple as denouncing them. Yu Ruifeng raised his hand and took out a piece of jade stone. He injected spiritual energy into it and the jade stone suddenly released a layer of jade brilliance that enveloped the three of them. This should be some kind of restriction that isolated sound and spiritual energy. Even so, Yu Ruifeng lowered his voice and said carefully, "Zhulu country and Profound Yang sect gathered a large amount of fine iron. It's very likely that it was ordered by the two pro-war princes. The higher-ups want us to secretly help the pro-peace faction suppress the pro-war faction." Leng Shiqi was secretly shocked. Was this to interfere with the internal affairs of another country? However, with just the few of them, could they do it? Yuan Song also frowned and asked, "Sir, we only have a total of 20 people. How can we interfere with the conflict between the two factions? If we knew this would happen, we should have brought more people." Yu Ruifeng shook his head. "If we bring too many people, it will arouse suspicion. Moreover, our goal is to suppress the pro-war faction, but not the two princes. We only need to use some methods to get rid of a few pro-war ministers and weaken their forces. The rest will be done by the pro-peace faction for us. But we just got here and something happened to the pro-war ministers. Isn't this too obvious?" Yuan Song was still a little hesitant. However, Leng Shiqi found that Zhou Tsang was worrying too much. Perhaps this person had been the great supervisor for too long, so he had to be meticulous in everything he did and not leave any loopholes. He didn't know that even if the people of Zhulu country knew that they were the ones who did it, so what? As long as they did it cleanly and didn't leave any traces, whether it was the king or the two princes, they wouldn't be able to offend the Thunderfire dynasty. Moreover, the pro-peace faction might even raise their hands to support their actions. A trace of dissatisfaction flashed across Yu Ruifeng's eyes, but he still patiently explained it to Leng Shiqi, which was exactly what he had expected. Then, they discussed some details of the plan and went their separate ways. Leng Shiqi returned to his room with complicated feelings. Since they wanted to interfere with the conflict between the factions of Zhulu country, then his matter of collecting large numbers of goo worms wouldn't be so smooth. Thinking of goo worms, he thought of Mo Huisho. Then, he sat cross-legged on the bed, and his eyes suddenly turned green and white. With his current mental strength, White Eye's field of vision had already expanded to a range of 7 to 8 miles. He could already see half of the royal city. The reason why Lin Shiqi activated White Eye was firstly to check how many experts there were in the royal city. Secondly, he wanted to try his luck and see if he could find Mo Huaishou. However, what surprised Lin Shiqi was that he really found Mo Huaishou. However, Mo Huaishou was actually in the royal palace. Chapter 353. Lin Shiqi didn't expect to find Mo Huaishou so quickly, and she was actually in the palace. Is she a member of Zhu Lu country's royal family? He guessed. But this was also good. He originally planned to use Mo Huaishou to help him collect goo worms, so the earlier he found her, the better. Unfortunately, now wasn't the time to go out, so Lin Shiqi could only stay in the room and cultivate. The night passed quickly, and it was very peaceful. The next morning, Lin Shiqi sent Guan Fei Hong to gather information, but he didn't want to gather information about the main combat faction, but he wanted information about the Goo God sect and goo worms. This was his main purpose in coming to Zhu Lu country. As for holding accountable and interfering in Zhu Lu country's faction disputes, with Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Sung around, there was no place for him to speak. Lin Shiqi walked out of the door and was surprised to see a group of Zhu Lu country's people rushing in angrily, heading straight for Yu Ruifeng's room. He furrowed his brows and felt a little uneasy. Something important must have happened to make these people so angry. So, he followed them. Lin Shiqi had just gotten close to Yu Ruifeng's room when he heard angry shouts coming from inside, and a piece of news that shocked him. Zhu Lu country's king died mysteriously last night. In a moment, thousands of thoughts flashed through Lin Shiqi's mind. The king died? No matter how small Zhu Lu country was, it was still a country. How could the king suddenly die? And he died after they came here, so it looked like they were the ones who did it. And those people just now were some of Zhu Lu country's ministers. They thought it was Yu Ruifeng and the others who killed him. Lin Shiqi walked into the room and saw Yu Ruifeng's face as black as an iron pot, being pointed at and questioned by a few people. Now, they had come here specifically to question him. In the end, before they could even begin, they were questioned by someone else. Lin Shiqi looked at Yu Ruifeng and knew that he had a lot of anger in his heart. Yu Ruifeng was the inspector of the West Baron Prefecture, and the prefecture he oversaw was even bigger than the Zhu Road country. He came to Zhu Road country with a bit of arrogance. Now that he was being questioned by a group of officials from a small country, he would definitely be furious. But Yu Ruifeng didn't say anything. He just sat there with a sullen face. Lin Shiqi nodded. Yu Ruifeng was right. At this time, Yu Ruifeng absolutely couldn't say anything. They had all stayed in the post house last night. Many of them could testify to each other. It would only take a little investigation to find out. And once Yu Ruifeng got angry, he would be caught red-handed and wouldn't let go. At this moment, Yuan Sung also rushed over. He chuckled and tried to smooth things over. Everyone. Sirs, there's no need to be so emotional. We've only just found out about your country's king's passing, and our hearts are filled with grief. But this matter has nothing to do with us. We didn't even take a step out of the post house. You'll know once you check. The people of the Thunder Flame dynasty are the most despicable. You just arrived at the king's city and the king died mysteriously. Who else could it be other than you? Don't think that we don't know. You're all from the Dark Thunder Guards, and you're all spirit cultivators of the Sky Realm. It's not impossible to assassinate the king without anyone knowing. You dare to assassinate the king? Take them down. Yuan Sung and Yu Ruifeng quickly exchanged glances. At this time, not only them, but even Lin Shiqi could see that these people were here to cause trouble. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that the reason why the Thunder Flame dynasty sent Lin Shiqi and the Dark Lightning Guards and delayed for more than a month before coming to the Zhu Road country was to make both sides turn the matter into a small one. As long as Zhu Road country took out some benefits, everyone would treat it as if the transportation of iron didn't happen. Therefore, Lin Shiqi and the others would definitely not assassinate the king. They had no motive at all. And these officials of Zhu Road country were all people who could sit in high positions. How could they be fools? How could they not see it? Therefore, these people wanted to use the king's death to put the hat of a major suspect on the Dark Thunder Guards. This way, the Dark Thunder Guards could only focus on proving their innocence. How could they have the chance to question the Zhu Road country about collecting iron? To Yu Ruifeng, the king's death was completely unexpected and completely disrupted the plan they made last night. But thinking about it, now that the king was dead, the throne was empty. There was no need to think about what would happen next. Zhu Road country would definitely fall into internal strife for the throne. As long as Zhu Road country fell into chaos, they would no longer have any thoughts of harming the Thunder Flame dynasty. This was a good thing. At this time, another person rushed in. It was Prince Gus. As soon as he walked in, he scolded the officials who were causing trouble, impudent. Lord Yu is the special envoy of the Thunder Flame dynasty. His status is noble and even this king is far inferior to him. You actually dare to question Lord Yu. You are really reckless. Prince Gus, their appearance and the king's death cannot be a coincidence. That's right. Even if they are the special envoys of the Thunder Flame dynasty, we must investigate this matter thoroughly. So what if they are from the Thunder Flame dynasty? They dare to assassinate the king. At most, we will fight them to the death. Enough. Prince Gus roared, a group of people who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Haven't you embarrassed yourselves enough? This king orders you to leave this place immediately. When they saw how angry Prince Gus was, they didn't dare to disobey the king's orders. They could only leave with righteous indignation while muttering. Prince Gus turned around and put on a warm smile. He said to Yu Ruifeng, Lord Yu, please forgive us. The cheating country's king suddenly passed away, and the officials were a little flustered. They should die 1,000 times for disturbing Lord Yu's rest. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Yu Ruifeng also squeezed out a smile and said, Prince Gus, what are you saying? I am also very surprised and sad about the death of your king. It is understandable that the officials are a little agitated. Prince Gus heaved a sigh of relief and said, Oh, since that is the case, this king will thank Lord Yu on behalf of those officials for letting bygones be bygones. Now that the king has passed away, the Zhu Lu country is without a leader. Lord Yu's matter may be pushed back for a while. It is fine. I am afraid that your country has a lot of things to deal with now. We can just wait here. Yu Ruifeng's words were full of understanding. Lord Yu is really magnanimous. This king admires you. Speaking until here, he sighed again. Sigh. The palace is in a mess now. This king still has to go back and pacify the officials. I will not disturb Lord Yu's rest. Prince, please do as you wish. After Prince Gus left, Yu Ruifeng asked Leng Shiqi who had been watching from the side, what do you think? Leng Shiqi said, one is playing the good cop, the other is playing the bad cop. Chapter 354. Yu Ruifeng looked at Leng Shiqi with appreciation. From the beginning, when Wuxiang came to him through the back door, he actually didn't put Leng Shiqi in his eyes, so he deliberately arranged the position of supervisor for Leng Shiqi. In his mind, Leng Shiqi would definitely not be able to stay in this position. He arranged this in order to let Leng Shiqi know that it was not easy to enter the Dark Thunder Guard, so that he would take the initiative to back out. But later, Leng Shiqi quickly stabilized his position as supervisor, and eliminated the Xianyang faction with lightning speed, and directly obtained the only position from eunuch Gao. All of these things made Yu Ruifeng re-evaluate Leng Shiqi again and again. Now, after getting along with him for a while, he found that Leng Shiqi was really capable. For example, in today's matter, if it was an ordinary supervisor, he would have already panicked, but Leng Shiqi was able to see through the deep meaning of it. Yu Ruifeng asked again, then why do you think they did this? Leng Shiqi pondered for a moment and said, whether their king died accidentally or not, they just want to take this opportunity to postpone the investigation indefinitely. Even when the new king ascends the throne, they can deny this account. That's right. Yu Ruifeng's expression at this time was very calm, and there was no longer a bellyful of anger like before. I didn't expect you to see it so clearly, but in this way, our investigation mission will be considered a failure. Not only that, I'm afraid we won't even have a chance to suppress the pro-war faction. We can only stay in this post as guests for a while, and then go back with our tails between our legs. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed with a glimmer of light, and said, not necessarily. Huh? Yu Ruifeng raised his eyebrows, showing a look of interest. From what you said, it seems that there is still a chance. Do you have any ideas? Leng Shiqi first quietly glanced at Yuan Song. In fact, the one discussing this with Yu Ruifeng should be Yuan Song, the supervisor. In fact, Leng Shiqi was stealing the limelight a bit. However, Zhou Tsang didn't seem to be dissatisfied at this moment, so Leng Shiqi continued, right now, the Zhu Road King's throne is vacant. Zhu Road is different from our Thunder Dynasty, the succession system of the throne succession system, which means that both the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction have a chance to ascend the throne. And we can secretly support the pro-war faction and let their people sit on the throne, which is equivalent to completing the mission. As for the investigation matter, we can use it as a bargaining chip. We can take the opportunity to gain more benefits. After Leng Shiqi finished speaking, Yu Ruifeng's eyes flickered, but before he could say anything, Yuan Sang said, that's not right. Let's not talk, with our abilities halses, the sect s hall. Zhu, SSS wills will not let's to say, they will s's will s Zhu Roads's halls was Zhu Road country's stabilizing force. The reason why Zhu Road country was able to exist until now wasn't because of how wealthy its citizens were, nor was it because of how elite its army was. It was because there were several Sky Origin stage experts in the hall. It was just that these Sky Origin stage experts didn't reveal themselves, and it had been many years since they showed themselves. They never asked about Zhu Road country's internal affairs. Even if the king was replaced, they wouldn't care. They would only show themselves when Zhu Road country was facing a calamity. And what Yuan Sang was worried about was the hall's hall. The reason why these experts didn't interfere in the fight for the throne was because no matter who the throne ended up in, it would still be someone from Zhu Road country. If they secretly supported the pro-peace faction to suppress the pro-war faction, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if they wanted to influence the candidate for the throne, it was very likely that the experts from the hall would be drawn out. At that time, they would probably have to stay here forever. Yu Ruifeng continued, Yuan Sang's words aren't without reason. Leng Shiqi said, I've considered this point before, but what if someone else begged us to get involved? Yuan Sang thought for a while and asked, you mean, the pro-peace faction will take the initiative to ask us for help? That's right. Leng Shiqi nodded and said, the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction are equal in power. It's impossible for them to quickly crush the other side. And with that extra power that suddenly appeared. Especially Lord Yu, who has the strength of Heaven Man Unity Stage, he's definitely a crucial power. Also, the pro-war faction's Prince Gus has come, the pro-peace faction's people will probably come soon. Yuan Sang could be the great supervisor, so he definitely had the ability. He thought carefully and said, yes, Prince Gus's attitude was very humble when he came. I think he also had the intention of giving us face. When the right opportunity comes, he will definitely contact us secretly. Yu Ruifeng's eyes were always on Leng Shiqi. He was a little surprised that Leng Shiqi could make this chaotic matter so orderly so quickly. So he admired Leng Shiqi even more. He said, you're all right. Being able to find a breakthrough in the chaos and continue to complete the mission is the ability and quality that we Dark Thunder Guards should have. It's just that the information we have is still too little. Pass down the order, let all the Dark Thunder Guards use all means to inquire about the king's death and the details of the two factions. Yes. Leng Shiqi and Yuan Sang answered at the same time, then left Yu Ruifeng's room. In fact, Leng Shiqi didn't have much to do, because he only had Guan Feihong as his subordinate, and he had already sent him out early in the morning. So he went back the way he came and continued to cultivate. However, It was a pity that there were too many people in this post house. Someone could come back to find him at any time, so he couldn't calm down to open up the spirit vein. The whole day passed just like that. What made him a little puzzled and worried was that Guan Feihong still hadn't returned. Leng Shiqi immediately opened his supercilious eyes. There was no Guan Feihong's spiritual aura within a radius of 7 to 8 miles. Where did he go? He muttered softly, but he wasn't too worried. No matter what, Guan Feihong's cultivation was at the late stage of the spiritual pulse realm, and he was a blood-clothed assassin of the blood-clothing pavilion. It wouldn't be so easy for something to happen to him. But then he was slightly stunned. Because he unexpectedly found Mo Huisho's spiritual aura near the post house. What does Mo Huisho want to do by approaching the post house? What is her identity in Zhulu country? Leng Shiqi's thoughts turned quickly. He locked onto Mo Huisho's aura and found that her figure was slowly approaching someone. That person was Jill. Chapter 355. Ever since Jill was captured at Ai Ming Mountain, he hadn't had a good life. Now, he was brought here as a witness and was locked up in the woodshed of the post hostel. There were even 2 Spirit Pulse Realm Dark Lightning emissaries guarding the door. Dark Lightning emissaries were all elites of the Dark Lightning Guards, but these 2 people didn't know that a figure had already sneaked into the woodshed. After Jill's arm was cut off and his cultivation was sealed by Leng Shiqi, they didn't torture him. But his face was ashen, as if he had nothing left to live for. Because he was very clear that as long as the Dark Lightning Guards handed him over to Zhu Lugua, he would only end up dead. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. This person was wearing a mask and was shrouded in a layer of faint black gas. Once this person appeared, he released a few goo worms into Jill's nose and mouth. This person was Mo Huisho in disguise. Jill immediately felt as if his throat was being squeezed tightly, making it hard for him to breathe. I ask, you answer. Otherwise, you will die from being eaten by 10,000 goo worms. Mo Huisho's voice was as cold as ice, making one shiver. As a citizen of Zhu Lugua, Jill obviously knew how tragic it was to be eaten by 10,000 goo worms. He instantly nodded. Mo Huisho asked coldly, who instructed you to go to Zhu Lugua to collect iron essence? Jill's eyes flickered. He said, it's Prince Gus. Nonsense. Mo Huisho shouted. I think you really want to try the taste of goo worms. Mo Huisho moved his finger, and the goo worms in Jill's body immediately started to devour his flesh. But his throat suddenly couldn't make any sound. Jill was in so much pain that his whole body twitched. After a few breaths, his whole body was soaked in sweat. Mo Huisho said coldly, still not telling the truth. Jill's eyes were filled with fear and panic. I am telling the truth. Good, very good. Seems like you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Mo Huisho prepared to torture Jill again, but who knew that Jill actually closed his eyes and put on a look of defiance. Seeing this, Mo Huisho also felt that it was a little tricky. She didn't expect Jill to be a tough nut to crack. Right now, she had sneaked in secretly. There were people from the Dark Thunder Guards guarding outside the door. If she made any noise, they would be alarmed. Once she was discovered by the Dark Thunder Guards this time, the Dark Thunder Guards would definitely guard Jill strictly in the future. It would be impossible for her to sneak in again. Just when Mo Huisho didn't know what to do, a voice came from outside the door. My 2 colleagues, Jill seems to know his place. So it's Lord Lu. Greetings, Lord Lu. Don't worry, Lord Lu. Jill knows his place. That's good. Thank you for your hard work. I have something to ask Jill. Please open the door. Mo Huisho, who was in the woodshed, recognized the voice the moment he heard it. It was Lu Xingji's voice. He's here too. That's right, he was the one who captured Jill and ruined the plan to collect refined iron. He should be here. However, when she heard that he was about to come in, she secretly cursed her bad luck. She lowered her voice and said to Jill, "You're a smart person. You should know what to say and what not to say. Let's talk when we have time." Then, the black gas around Imo Huesho surged and his figure disappeared. Creak. The door of the woodshed was opened. Ling Shiqi walked in and closed the door. He saw that Jill was sweating profusely and looked exhausted. However, he didn't show any surprise. Jill was also terrified. He didn't know how to explain to Ling Shiqi. However, he had to thank Ling Shiqi for coming to find him. This was equivalent to saving his life. However, Ling Shiqi's next sentence made him horrified. Ling Shiqi said, "Jill, I saved your life. How do you think you should repay me? What are you talking about? I don't understand." Jill was still stubborn. Ling Shiqi nodded lightly and said, "You think I don't know what happened here? Then let me guess. Why would you rather be bitten to death by the goo worms than tell me the truth? There must be someone or something important that fell into the hands of the mastermind." Hearing this, Jill's eyes narrowed slightly. Although he recovered quickly, Ling Shiqi's sharp senses still caught it. Ling Shiqi waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in your matters. I'm also not interested in the mastermind. After all, I'm from the Thunderstorm dynasty and can't be bothered to get involved in your Zhu Lu country's mess. However, there's a piece of news that you might not know." "What?" Jill's heart skipped a beat. He felt that what Ling Shiqi was going to say next would definitely be shocking. Ling Shiqi said in an indifferent tone, "Your king is dead." "The king is dead." This sentence was as simple as saying, "I've eaten," in Ling Shiqi's mouth. However, in Jill's ears, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. He was instantly stunned. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's eyes suddenly emitted 2 rays of 5 colors. He seized the moment when Jill was distracted and used both the soul-scaring technique and the mind-stealing technique at the same time. A great fear struck Jill's soul and instantly pushed his mind to the verge of collapse. Ling Shiqi asked in a tempting voice, "Were you ordered to sneak into the Western Desolate Province?" "Yes." Jill's eyes were empty as he said weakly. "Were you the one who secretly bribed Li Xianyang of the Profound Yang sect to collect large amounts of refined iron for you?" "Yes." "Were you forced to go to the Western Desolate Province to do this?" "Yes." At this point, Ling Shiqi hesitated and asked tentatively, "Was it the state elder and state teacher who asked you to go?" Jill's face suddenly showed a painful expression. He actually almost broke free from the illusion. However, he failed in the end. He opened his mouth and said one word. "Yes." Hearing this answer, even Ling Shiqi was shocked. Just now, he originally wanted to ask if it was Prince Gus who sent him. However, he immediately remembered that Imo Huesho secretly came to interrogate Jill in the middle of the night. This meant that Jill probably had a huge secret. On the surface, what Jill did was indeed in line with the actions of the pro-war faction. Therefore, including Ling Shiqi and all the Dark Thunder Guards subconsciously thought that the 2 princes were the masterminds behind this. However, Ling Shiqi had a sudden inspiration to change his tone, and he had really discovered a shocking secret. It turned out that the people who sent people to the Western Desolate Province to collect refined iron were actually the 2 leaders of the peace faction. Chapter 356. If Jill's matter was arranged by the peacemakers, what was their purpose? The peacemakers naturally supported the peaceful coexistence of Zhu Lu country and the 5 surrounding countries, as well as the Thunderfire dynasty. Since that was the case, why did they need to collect large amounts of fine iron? Fine iron was obviously used to make weapons, but if it wasn't for war, why would they need to make so many weapons? Zhu Lu country didn't have a lot of soldiers. If it wasn't for war, they would have enough weapons and armor. Only during war would a large amount of weapons and armor be destroyed and require a large amount of fine iron to support the rear. Therefore, the peacemakers didn't want Jill to collect fine iron for war, so they must have other purposes. Ling Shiqi's mind was full of thoughts. He quickly remembered that the mind-controlling voodoo that Li Xianyang used to control him was brought by Jill. The mind-controlling voodoo was extremely precious. Even the princes and ministers of Zhu Lu country might not be able to get their hands on it. Who could easily take out the mind-controlling voodoo? Naturally, it would be the Gu God sect that specialized in voodoo. The sect leader of the Gu God sect was also the state teacher of Zhu Lu country. He was one of the higher-ups of the peacemakers. I should have thought of it. Leng Shiqi also felt that he had overlooked something. When he knew that the sect leader of the Gu God sect was one of the higher-ups of the peacemakers, he should have guessed it. However, it wasn't too late now. Now that Leng Shiqi had learned the truth from Jill, it was time for him to carefully consider another matter. That is, Jill was caught smuggling fine iron in the West Desolate province, the Dark Thunder Guards came to investigate, and then the king's sudden death. Is there any connection between these matters? From the perspective of a conspiracy theory, could this series of events have been premeditated? To be honest, Jill's method of secretly collecting fine iron in the West Desolate province wasn't that brilliant. When Leng Shiqi took over the Dark Thunder Manor in Mist Chi City, he saw that the Du family was likely smuggling fine iron, but there was no conclusive evidence. This meant that the Dark Thunder Guards had been watching the Du family and Profound Yang sect for a long time. This was also the reason why the previous supervisor, Sha Yu, died. Therefore, even if there was no Leng Shiqi and Leng Shiqi might be able to unravel Jill's scheme in the future. After all, the Dark Thunder Guards were full of elites. As long as they found solid evidence and reported it to their superiors, destroying the Profound Yang sect would be a piece of cake. In other words, it was very likely that what Jill had done would still be discovered. After that, the Dark Thunder Guards would also come to the Zhu Road country to question him. The king would also die like this. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi felt a chill run down his spine. If what he speculated was true, then the person behind this was truly terrifying. If what he speculated was true, then there would definitely be major changes waiting for them in the future. It was actually very simple to prove that his guess was correct. Leng Shiqi continued to ask while Jill was still under the control of the illusion, "Are you the only one who sneaked into the western wilderness to collect iron?" No. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed. He already knew the answer. It seems that not only in the northern region of the western wilderness, but also in other regions, there were people similar to Jill doing the same thing. If they stayed in the western wilderness for a long time, sooner or later they would be exposed. This also meant that the Dark Thunder Guards would come to the Zhu Road country sooner or later. All of this was indeed the same as Leng Shiqi's guess. But then, his brows deeply furrowed. Since the peace faction spent so much effort to trick them into coming to the Zhu Road country, then the king's death was most likely related to the peace faction. Now what Leng Shiqi was most concerned about was, what was their purpose? He faintly felt that they had been deeply involved in a terrible whirlpool. Just as Leng Shiqi was thinking hard, there was suddenly a big commotion in the inn. His heart tightened and he hurriedly walked out of the woodshed. Jill's eyes rolled back and he fainted. Leng Shiqi quickly arrived at the courtyard of the post house. He saw several hundred Zhu Lu country's guards had already surrounded the place so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. More than 10 people were confronting each other in the courtyard, including Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song. As for the other side, it was Prince Gus and Prince Heli from the war faction. What surprised him the most was that Guan Feihong was standing right next to Prince Gus. At this moment, Guan Feihong was covered in injuries and his expression was somewhat stiff. More importantly, Leng Shiqi actually felt a familiar aura from Guan Feihong's body. Heart-controlling goo. Prince Heli and Prince Gus looked similar in appearance. It seemed like they were a pair of brothers. The difference was that Prince Heli was tall and big. Just by standing there, he looked like a ferocious beast. Prince Heli angrily shouted at Yu Ruifeng, "Yu Ruifeng! It really was your Thunderfire dynasty's people who killed the king. Now that the witness is here, let's see how you're going to quibble." When Yu Ruifeng saw Leng Shiqi coming over, he immediately transmitted his voice, "What's going on? How did your people fall into their hands and accuse us of assassinating the king?" When Leng Shiqi sensed the heart-controlling goo in Guan Feihong's body, he knew what was going on. However, he couldn't say it out loud and could only explain, "Sir, I don't know either. I sent Guan Feihong out to scout this morning, but he didn't return at night. I didn't expect him to be captured by Zhu Road country. But sir, you should be able to see that Guan Feihong's condition isn't right. Perhaps they used some method to control him." Yu Ruifeng nodded inwardly. Facing the two princes of Zhu Road country, he didn't lose out in terms of aura. He said, "Princes, I respect you as princes of your country, which is why I'm negotiating with you. What's laughable is that as princes, you can't even see that they're trying to drive a wedge between us. Truly disappointing." "What did you say?" Prince Heli's eyes widened in anger. At this moment, Prince Gus pulled him back and said calmly, "Sir Yu, we caught this person near the city gate tonight. He wanted to escape the city, but we interrogated him and he told us the truth about your assassination of the king. Sir Yu, you should give us a suitable answer, right? Otherwise, even if you're from the Thunderfire dynasty, we'll still take revenge for His Majesty with our lives." At the end, Prince Gus's tone was filled with bloodthirst. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but feel anxious. He had guessed the truth, but there were too many people here and he couldn't tell Yu Ruifeng. Moreover, even if he said it, Zhu Road country's people might not believe him. On the contrary, they might even use Guan Feihong as one of his people to refute him. Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes and forced himself to calm down to find a solution. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. He found a breakthrough. Chapter 357. The breakthrough that Ling Shiqi thought of was to help Guan Feihong get rid of the mind-controlling voodoo. However, it was not easy to get rid of the mind-controlling voodoo. After all, he did not have 9 leaves powerful soul power that could directly devour the mind-controlling voodoo's soul. So he thought of an old method. Using illusions to get rid of illusions. Ling Shiqi had also studied and refined mind-controlling voodoo before. He knew that mind-controlling voodoo was actually constantly releasing illusions to control people's minds. So Ling Shiqi thought of the method that he used in the Phantom Realm to make Guan Feihong fall into the illusion again. It might help him temporarily get rid of the mind-controlling voodoo. The reason why it was temporary was because the mind-controlling voodoo was constantly releasing illusions, and Ling Shiqi could not do it. However, it was enough as long as he could get rid of the mind-controlling voodoo in a short period of time. Yu Ruifeng was still arguing with the two princes, but they did not seem to have any intention of fighting. Ling Shiqi also guessed that they would not fight because once they did, there would be no room for retreat. Ling Shiqi hid behind people and secretly forced out a few drops of essence blood to form the ghost blood tattoo on his forehead. At the same time, a majestic mental power surged out. Guan Feihong was also in the late stage of the spirit pulse realm. If Ling Shiqi wanted to make him fall into the illusion instantly, he would have to use all his strength. Ling Shiqi did not hide his actions and was quickly discovered by the people of Zhulugua. Especially since the two princes were also in the unity of heaven and man realm, they noticed Ling Shiqi's mental power. Prince Heli immediately shouted, "Where did this junior come from? Do you want to fight?" Yu Ruifeng was also a little surprised by this, but he thought that Ling Shiqi must have his reasons for doing this. Moreover, no matter what, he had to protect Ling Shiqi. He moved his feet and vaguely protected Ling Shiqi behind him. Before Guan Feihong could say anything, he saw Ling Shiqi's eyes shoot out colorful lights. Then, Guan Feihong's face became a little distorted. His expression was sometimes painful, sometimes sluggish, and sometimes very shrewd. Guan Feihong opened his mouth and said intermittently, "My heart is controlled." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Yu Ruifeng made a prompt decision and shouted, "Princes, what is the meaning of this? You actually secretly controlled the Dark Thunder Guards to point us? Do you think the Dark Thunder dynasty is easy to bully?" Prince Gus and Prince Holy's expressions froze. Things had gone beyond their expectations. "Ha!" Ling Shiqi suddenly roared. He had already unleashed his mental energy to the maximum, and the invisible mental energy around him even stirred up gusts of wind. This scene shocked many people. Even a spirit aperture realm spirit caster might not have this level of spirit pulse. Under Lin Shiqi's full power illusion, Guan Feihong's eyes finally regained some clarity. He also knew that he didn't have much time, so he quickly said, "It's the Gu God sect's leader, Sang Hetong. He used Gu worms to control me and deliberately let me be captured by the Imperial Guards so that the princes would attack the Dark Thunder Guards." After saying this, Guan Feihong's eyes lost their light again. Lin Shiqi panted and stopped the illusion. Just letting Guan Feihong regain his consciousness for 2 breaths was already his limit. At this point, the truth had already surfaced. Even if the people of Zhulu didn't cultivate Gu, they had seen it before. At this moment, they could see that Guan Feihong was hit by some powerful Gu. In other words, they were all played. The 2 princes' faces were uglier than the other. Prince Gus took the lead and said, "Lord Yu, so it was all a misunderstanding. You and I were both tricked. Lord Yu, please don't blame us." Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed and he said with a mocking tone, "Even if someone was secretly manipulating you, you're both honorable princes. You're really capable to be fooled by such a small trick." Prince Heli's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. At this moment, he was a bit glad that he didn't act too impulsively. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. He walked in front of Yu Ruifeng with a twisted face. The Dark Thunder Guards thought he was going to attack, but he lowered his head and said, "Yu Ruifeng, Healy, did not consider this matter thoroughly and almost caused a disaster. Healy, apologize to you." At the end of his speech, he even cupped his hands towards Yu Ruifeng in the Thunderblaze dynasty's etiquette. Seeing this, Lin Shiqi felt that Prince Heli was a straightforward man who could let go of things easily. Forget it. Yu Ruifeng could only give up. Even a prince bowed his head to him. What else did he want? Yu Ruifeng lowered his voice and said, "However, since someone dared to scheme against the princes and the Dark Thunder Guards, I won't take this lying down." What do the 2 princes think? Yu Ruifeng was also very depressed. In the morning, they had discussed that they would wait for the peacemakers to come to their door. However, they didn't expect that it would be the 2 princes from the war faction who came to their door to denounce them. This had already disrupted their plans twice in a row. Just as he didn't know what to do, Lin Shiqi broke the deadlock. Now that the clouds had cleared, Yu Ruifeng's heart gave birth to other thoughts. Prince Gus and Prince Heli both understood the meaning behind his words. He wanted them to join hands to deal with the peacemakers. Prince Gus's eyes flashed. If they could get the support of Yu Ruifeng and the Dark Thunder Guards, they would have a great chance of winning. However, this wasn't a brilliant plan. The more brilliant plan was to use the controlled Guan Feihong as a spy to make the peacemakers think that the Dark Thunder Guards and the war faction had completely fallen out. In this way, the peacemakers would take the initiative to contact the Dark Thunder Guards. When the time comes, the Dark Thunder Guards would be a bomb buried beside the peacemakers. Prince Gus immediately said, "Lord Yu is right. Prince Heli and I hate being schemed against the most. As for the person behind this, we brothers will definitely show them who's behind this. However, it would be best if we could get Lord Yu's help." Yu Ruifeng glanced at the guards around him and then looked at Guan Feihong. He didn't say anything. Prince Gus smiled and said, "Don't worry, Lord Yu. The people we brought tonight are all our trusted subordinates. They won't leak anything out." Yu Ruifeng nodded first, but in the next moment, he threw a punch at Prince Gus. Prince Gus's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he also threw a punch at him. Although the 2 fists did not explode with any powerful spiritual energy or spiritual light, when the 2 collided, a terrifying wave of spiritual energy suddenly blasted out, shaking everyone around and forcing them to retreat again and again. Lin Shiqi quickly retreated. He knew that the show had begun. Chapter 358. Boom! A loud explosion resounded in the sky above the inn, and all the tiles in the inn's courtyard were sent flying. Fortunately, the surrounding people were all spirit cultivator, and no one was injured, but they couldn't help but be flustered. Yu Ruifeng and Prince Gus, these two spirit cultivators at unity of heaven and man realm, fought. Even if they didn't use any spirit techniques or full strength, it was still shocking enough. Prince Gus roared with a red face, "What a good Dark Thunder Guard, what a good Yu Ruifeng, the witnesses are here, and you still refuse to admit it." Yu Ruifeng also roared, "What a joke, the king of a small country is nothing, even if he was tied up in front of me, I would be too lazy to kill him. Impudent! You dare to insult the late king in front of me." Prince Heli jumped out and started to add on to his act. Yu Ruifeng coldly shouted, I'm standing right here, let's see who dares to make a move. If we die here, your Zhu Lu country will be erased from the falling star continent." You! The two princes glared at each other, but they didn't make a move. The two sides argued for a while, then Prince Gus said, "Guards, from today onwards, surround the inn. Without special orders, no one is allowed to enter or leave." Prince Heli fiercely said, "Just wait until we find conclusive evidence, even if we kill you on the spot, the Thunder Flame dynasty won't have anything to say." Yu Ruifeng's face was gloomy, and he spat out two words. "I won't see you off." Immediately, the two princes brought a portion of the guards and Guan Feihong out of the inn. Leng Shiqi watched from the side as they tried their best to perform. He estimated that by tomorrow morning, the news of the Dark Thunder Guard's inspector and Prince Gus's fight would spread through the streets. And with the inn surrounded by the guards, everyone would know that the two princes had completely fallen out with the Dark Thunder Guard. At this time, Yu Ruifeng gave a look to Leng Shiqi and Yuan Song, then turned and walked into the room. Leng Shiqi understood and followed. Yu Ruifeng closed the door and said to Leng Shiqi, "You did very well." Yuan Song also said with great admiration, "I didn't expect Supervisor Lu's observation to be so meticulous, to be able to see that Guan Feihong was being controlled. You were even able to break that strange technique. Truly admirable." Leng Shiqi said modestly, "Sirs, you flatter me. I only saw the clues because I know Guan Feihong very well." But Yu Ruifeng said, "You have indeed made a great contribution in this matter. I will remember this in my heart. If you hadn't temporarily dispelled that technique today, I'm afraid we really might have died here." At this point, Yu Ruifeng's face darkened. The sect leader of the Gu God sect is really something. Then Leng Shiqi told him about his interrogation of Jill and his suspicions. When Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song heard this, their faces sank. At this point, they all understood that the peace faction was secretly manipulating everything behind the scenes. Yu Ruifeng's eyes suddenly revealed a shocking cold light. He was able to sit in the position of the Western Wilderness County's inspector because of his shrewdness and skill. Moreover, his style of doing things had always been radical. This time, the peace faction had secretly schemed against him from the beginning to the end, so he naturally had to retaliate. As for the mission, as long as he could make Zhu Lugua obediently not cause trouble, the mission would be considered completed. Yu Ruifeng said in a low voice, "We are now standing with the war faction, but I believe that the peace faction will definitely come to me in 2 days. At that time, I will also agree to help them. Then, we will continue to sow discord between the two sides in secret and slowly weaken their strength. When the time is right, we will choose one side to take the throne." Leng Shiqi nodded secretly. Yu Ruifeng's thoughts were similar to his. He was treating himself as a double agent and was planning to trap both sides. The more the war faction and the peace faction fought, the weaker Zhu Lugua would become, which was naturally beneficial to the Thunderflame dynasty. However, Leng Shiqi felt that what they lacked the most now was information. It had only been a day and a night since they came to Zhu Lugua, but so many unexpected and dangerous things had happened. Moreover, they were all very passive. That was because their information was simply too limited. Even now, they hadn't even entered the palace gates, so they still didn't know how the king died. The Dark Thunder Guards that were sent out to collect information also had very little information. Therefore, after chatting with Yu Ruifeng for a while, Leng Shiqi decided to go out and investigate himself. Taking advantage of the night, he easily left the post house that was surrounded by the Imperial Guards using the Hand of Earth. Then, he quickly went around the entire monarch city. His purpose was to light up the entire monarch city's system map. At the same time, he also used the supercilious eyes to look for traces of Mo Huisho. When he finished opening the system map, it was already the middle of the night, and he had already locked onto Mo Huisho's position. After Mo Huisho failed to interrogate Jill, she went to a slum in the north of the city. Zhu Lugua had never been rich. Even in Monarch City, there were slums. Leng Shiqi remembered that when he first found Mo Huisho by chance, she was in the palace, which meant that her status was not low. But now, she actually went to the slums. There must be some unspeakable secrets there. Leng Shiqi quietly approached the slums and immediately found Mo Huisho's spiritual aura. However, beside her, there was an aura that was slightly stronger than hers. It should also be a spirit aperture realm cultivator, but his realm was slightly higher than Mo Huisho's. Leng Shiqi knew that experts in the spirit astral realm could sense all kinds of auras around them, but spirit aperture realm experts couldn't. Therefore, he directly sank into the ground and quietly approached Mo Huisho's position. When he got closer, he heard Mo Huisho's voice. This time, she was using her original voice. Jill refused to let go. Now, Prince Gus and Prince Heli have already found the Dark Thunder Guards. Especially since Prince Heli has a fiery temper, I'm afraid things will get out of hand. Another person said, that's not necessarily true. Prince Heli looks careless on the surface, but he's actually very meticulous. Even so, it's completely impossible for the pro-war faction to win over the Dark Thunder Guard support. This strong force will benefit the pro-peace faction. That's not necessarily true. As long as the princess consort goes to meet Yu Ruifeng before the state elder and state preceptor, she might be able to win over the Dark Thunder Guards. Let mother personally go. That's impossible. Mo Huisho's voice suddenly became cold. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi suddenly felt an explosion of information. Mo Huisho was actually the king and princess consort's daughter. In other words, Mo Huisho was actually the princess of Zhu Lugua. Chapter 359. Leng Shiqi was even more puzzled. Since Mo Huisho was the princess of Zhu Lu country, why would she run to the West Desolate province? She even came up with the name of the great thief Mo Huisho. But Leng Shiqi wasn't very clear about the members of the royal family of Zhu Lu country. He only knew that the king indeed had a daughter, but he didn't know what her name was. Leng Shiqi suppressed the curiosity in his heart and continued to listen. Your Highness, what time is it now? Are you still bothered about your identity and face? Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but no matter which faction ascends the throne, you and Princess Consort will definitely not have a good ending. Now the only way out and support is the Dark Thunder Guards. Mo Huisho was silent for a while before she spoke. But this time, her voice sounded a little sorrowful. How could I not know what you said? But Imperial Mother and I are weak. We don't have military power nor the support of the ministers in the court. How can we fight with the two factions? The Dark Thunder Guards will definitely not choose us. Furthermore, the Dark Thunder Guards are already suspected of assassinating Imperial Father. They can't even protect themselves, so what ability do they have to help us? Your Highness, don't belittle yourself. At least some of the clan relatives will support you. In addition, Your Highness, don't underestimate the Dark Thunder Guards. Those people will definitely not sit still and wait for death. At this time, they will definitely be eager to take the initiative. As long as Princess Consort can help them out of their current predicament, it will be equivalent to sending charcoal in snowy weather. It will be easy to rope them in. Furthermore, Your Highness often goes to the West Desolate province. You should know what the Dark Thunder Guards are best at. Mo Huisho muttered, Dark Thunder Guards are best at investigation. That's right. The death of His Majesty has always been a mystery. Many people in the court think that they must first investigate the cause of death of the king and find the murderer who murdered the king. So the two princes of the pro-war faction were so anxious to start a conflict with the Dark Thunder Guards. If Princess Consort can invite the Dark Thunder Guards to help us investigate the king's death and find the murderer, not only can it help them clear their grievances, it can also help us win over many people's support. But the Dark Thunder Guards themselves are suspected of murdering Imperial Father. The two factions will never agree to let them investigate the cause of Imperial Father's death. Don't worry, Your Highness. As long as Her Highness is willing to step in, I will have a way. Sigh, alright, that's all we can do now. I'll have to trouble you then, senior brother. Your Highness is too polite. It is my honor to be of service to Your Highness. After that, the two left the slum separately. Ling Shiqi thought for a while. Judging from the conversation between the two, it seemed that the Princess Consort's faction was preparing to intervene in the fight for the throne, and they were also planning to rope in the Dark Thunder Guards. This was also reasonable. Actually, the Princess Consort's bloodline was not without hope. From the point of view of Yu Ruifeng and the Dark Thunder Guards, they didn't want the pro-war faction to take over, nor did they want the pro-peace faction to take over. After all, it could be said that the peacemakers had been plotting against the Dark Thunder Guards from the beginning to the end. Therefore, the Princess Consort's bloodline was the most suitable. However, Ling Shiqi was very interested in Mo Huaishou and the identity of this senior brother that she mentioned. He practiced the Thousand Gu spirit-devouring skill. When he came to Zhulu country, he knew that this skill was a forbidden skill of the Gu God sect, and only the core disciples of the Gu God sect were qualified to practice it. Therefore, Mo Huaishou must be a member of the Gu God sect, and so should that senior brother. But this was interesting. Logically speaking, Mo Huaishou should belong to the pro-peace faction, but now she wanted to take over the throne by herself. Not only that, what made Ling Shiqi more curious was why Mo Huaishou, as the princess of Zhulu country, would join the Gu God sect. There might be many unknown secrets hidden in it. Although he had obtained some useful information from this trip, it also raised more questions. Ling Shiqi shook his head. He didn't want to delve into the inside story of the royal family of Zhulu country. The most important thing now was to inquire more information, so that he could have some initiative. Next, he wandered in the mansions of various ministers in Yunwu City. He kept a respectful distance from all the masters of Gang's spirit realm in the mansion. In this way, he didn't return to his room until dawn. This night, he didn't gain much, but it wasn't little either. At least he had learned the cause of the king's death. The king's death was really strange. Although his health was not good, especially recently, it was getting worse and worse. But under the treatment of many imperial doctors, he could have held on for another 2 or 3 years. But just last night, he suddenly died. Last night, the king was still reading the memorials as usual. Suddenly, he fell on the table weakly and died. After examination, there was no wound on the king's body, and there was no sign of poisoning in his body. He died so strangely. Now, people of the two factions were trying hard to find the cause of the king's death and catch the king's assassin. Whoever could solve this problem would have a great advantage in fighting for the throne. But at present, the only suspect was the Dark Thunder Guard. Because there was a witness in the Dark Thunder Guard, Guan Feihong. Thinking of Guan Feihong, Ling Shiqi couldn't help touching his chin. Guan Feihong could be said to be a knife of the pro-peace faction. But after Ling Shiqi saw through the mind-controlling insect, he became a knife of the pro-war faction and the Dark Thunder Guard. Guan Feihong was now a spy on 3 sides. But Ling Shiqi was more concerned about why he was implanted with the mind-controlling insect. According to Prince Heli, Guan Feihong was arrested near the city gate. Ling Shiqi remembered that he didn't find Guan Feihong even when he rolled his eyes, which meant that Guan Feihong probably left Yunwu City. And he was implanted with the mind-controlling insect, so it was very likely that he went to the Gu God sect. The Gu God sect was located on the Gu God Peak dozens of miles away from Yunwu City. Before, Ling Shiqi had always suspected that Guan Feihong seemed to have something to do with the Gu God sect. Now it seemed that it was true. He probably wanted to go to the Gu God sect to inquire about information, but he was discovered. He was also recognized as a Dark Thunder Guard, so he was implanted with the mind-controlling insect to point out the Dark Thunder Guard. It seems that I still have to find a chance to bring Guan Feihong back. Ling Shiqi murmured. Guan Feihong must still have secrets that ordinary people didn't know, but he was now imprisoned in the prince's mansion. There were not only spirit cultivators in the gang's spirit realm, but also masters of the oneness of heaven and men realm. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to sneak in there, so this matter had to be considered in the long run. Just as he was thinking about how to contact Guan Feihong, Yu Ruifeng asked someone to summon him. As soon as he saw Yu Ruifeng, he said something surprising. Last night, the leader of the Gu Gods sect, Sang Hetong, came to see me. Chapter 360. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He wasn't surprised that the Gu Gods sect's hierarch could easily get past the Imperial Guards outside. It was because this was nothing to an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. He was surprised that the Gu Gods sect's leader came so quickly. Ling Shiqi was still thinking that now that the show had just begun, the pro-war faction had already shown up, and the princess's faction was ready to make a move. It was time for the pro-peace faction to appear. But last night, one of the leaders of the pro-peace faction, the Gu God sect's leader, Sang Hetong, had already come to find Yu Ruifeng. Yu Ruifeng set up an isolation restriction and said to Ling Shiqi and Yuan Song, Sang Hetong really came to find us to cooperate, and can temporarily remove our suspicion. Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows when he heard this. The pro-peace faction and the princess's faction wanted to help them clear their suspicion. It seemed that there would be a good show to watch. Now, we have a foot in both boats, and what we need to do is sink both boats. Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed fiercely. But Ling Shiqi thought to himself, I'm afraid we're not in 2 boats, but 3. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. My lord, Princess Bess had a conflict with the Imperial Guards outside the post house. Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song were both surprised. Why did the princess come to find them? She even had a conflict with the Imperial Guards. Didn't this offend the 2 princes? Zhu Lu country wasn't a hereditary system, and if one of the 2 princes ascended the throne in the future, this princess would suffer. But since she was already here, there was no reason to not see her. Yu Ruifeng immediately rushed to the gate of the post house with Ling Shiqi and Yuan Song. Princess Bess looked to be in her 30s. She wasn't extremely beautiful, but she was full of luxurious and graceful temperament. At this moment, she angrily stared at the Imperial Guard who stopped her. I'll say it again, get out of the way. Please forgive me, Princess. The 2 princes personally ordered that unless there is a special order, no one is allowed to enter or leave. Please don't make things difficult for me. The Imperial Guard half knelt in front of Princess Bess, but he didn't move half a step. Special order. I wonder if this token in my hand can be used. Bess took out a token that looked like it was made of jade, but wasn't made of jade, and seemed to be made of gold, but wasn't made of gold. All the Imperial Guards knelt down when they saw this item. Bess Wangfei directly stepped over the person who was blocking her. The guard didn't stop her anymore because what Bess Wangfei took out was the royal token of Zhu Lu. It symbolized the highest authority in Zhu Lu country. At this time, Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed with surprise. He went forward and cupped his hands. Greetings, Your Highness. Wang Fei first smiled gently at Yu Ruifeng, but she did not speak to Yu Ruifeng. Instead, she turned and spoke to the Imperial Guards kneeling on the ground. I can prove that His Majesty's death has nothing to do with the Dark Thunder Guards. You can go back now. The Imperial Guards hesitated. They didn't dare to disobey the prince's orders, but they didn't dare to disobey the king's orders either. In the end, they could only say in unison, Yes, Your Majesty. Then, the Imperial Guards left in a neat formation like the tide. Ling Shiqi and the others saw all of this. He knew that Wang Fei must have asked the Dark Thunder Guards for help. Bess Wangfei then smiled at Yu Ruifeng and said, I've wronged Lord Yu and the Dark Thunder Guards, please don't blame me. Yu Ruifeng also revealed a smile. It's an honor for Wang Fei to come here. Wang Fei, please come in. Wait. A rough voice suddenly came. Leng Shiqi looked over and saw the tall Prince Heli arrive in front of the guest house like a meteor. Wang Fei's eyes flickered and there was an undetectable trace of panic in them. Prince Heli walked over with large strides. His eyes were wide open and filled with anger. It looked a bit scary from afar. Bess, was it you who withdrew the Imperial Guards? He actually called Wang Fei by her name, and there wasn't the slightest bit of respect in his tone, it was even questioning. Wang Fei's expression darkened. She hadn't expected Prince Heli to come so quickly, she had only said a few words. Furthermore, Prince Heli's attitude toward her made her even angrier, but she didn't dare flare up. She continued to smile and said, "Prince Heli, you really came quickly. Answer my question." Prince Heli didn't want to waste words with her, and his attitude was very unyielding. Wang Fei's smile faded. She took out the king's order and pointed at Prince Heli. "What, does Prince Heli want to defy the king's order? Or are you already looking down on Wang Ling?" Prince Heli's face twitched a few times, and he shouted in a low voice, "Humph, even if you have the king's order, you can't get close to the Dark Thunder Guards at will. They're a major suspect in the assassination of His Majesty the King." "Nonsense. His Majesty the King's death has nothing to do with the Dark Thunder Guards. I can testify to that. Do you know that you almost made a big mistake and almost pushed our Zhu Road country into the abyss?" Wang Fei's tone also became unyielding. "The princess is right." At that moment, an old man with white hair and a white beard walked in with a walking stick, accompanied by a group of people. He was Zhu Road country's elder, Chu Li. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed. The three forces vying for the throne of Zhu Road were now gathered, but the leader of the Gu God sect, Sanghatong, and Prince Gus weren't here. Chu Li's appearance here was completely out of Wang Fei's and Prince Heli's expectations, but within Yu Ruifeng and Leng Shiqi's expectations. Chu Li's words shocked Wang Fei and Prince Heli at the same time. Judging from Chu Li's words, he seemed to be supporting Wang Fei. Chu Li ignored their astonishment. He looked straight at Yu Ruifeng and said, "Lord Yu and the Dark Thunder Guards never left the post house on the night of His Majesty's death, so how could they assassinate His Majesty? As for the witness, I think it was tampered with by someone, so it can't be taken seriously." Wang Fei's mood was very complicated. Chu Li's sudden appearance could suppress Prince Heli. But this way, the Dark Thunder Guards wouldn't only remember her benefits. She gritted her teeth and said, "That's right. I heard that the Dark Thunder Guards are best at investigating and solving cases. Why don't we trouble them to investigate the cause of His Majesty's death?" Prince Heli immediately shouted, "Impossible. I'm not asking for your opinion. Does Lord Yu think this is feasible?" Wang Fei directly asked Yu Ruifeng for his opinion. Yu Ruifeng's eyes swept over the three people present, then he looked at Yuan Song and Leng Shiqi. He nodded, "Since the princess has spoken, it would be unsatisfactory if we refuse. But I don't know if the elder and Prince Heli will agree." Yu Ruifeng's words caused the three parties to have their own thoughts. Chapter 361. Bess Wang Fei had the Dark Thunder Guards investigate the king's death, which surprised Prince Heli and Elder Chu Li. But they quickly realized that Bess Wang Fei wanted to use this opportunity to win over the Dark Thunder Guards. All three sides wanted the Dark Thunder Guards' help, but it was clear that the Dark Thunder Guards could only choose one side. Now, the peacemakers thought the Dark Thunder Guards were on their side. The warmongers thought the Dark Thunder Guards were spies they had planted in the peacemakers. Only Bess Wang Fei hadn't clearly won over the Dark Thunder Guards, so she was the most anxious. But fortunately, Yu Ruifeng had given her a clear answer. What she needed to do next was to ensure that the Dark Thunder Guards could investigate the king's death. Then she would have many opportunities to contact the Dark Thunder Guards. Elder Chu Li was in a bit of a dilemma. His trip today was to lift the Dark Thunder Guards' house arrest and give them face. This point happened to coincide with Bess Wang Fei, so he supported her from the beginning. But he didn't want to let the Dark Thunder Guards investigate the king's death. He had some understanding of the Dark Thunder Guards' abilities. If the Dark Thunder Guards really did intervene, they might be able to find the truth. But he had just stood on the Dark Thunder Guard's side, so he had no choice but to agree now. So he could only say, "This old man agrees with the Wang Fei's proposal." Prince Heli was inferior, so he could only hold his face and silently nod. Bess Wang Fei chuckled, "That is good. This matter should not be delayed. Please enter the palace as soon as possible, Lord Yu." "Don't worry, Wang Fei. After we arrange things, we will enter the palace to investigate the truth of the king's death." When Yu Ruifeng said this, he noticed Lin Shiqi give him a look. Yu Ruifeng immediately looked at Prince Heli. "Prince Heli, since the Wang Fei and Elder Chu Li can prove that the Dark Thunder Guards are not suspected of killing the king, then can my subordinate Guan Feihong be released?" Prince Heli snorted, "Yes." Everyone saw that the matter was settled, so there was no need to stay. Before Chu Li and Prince Heli left, they both looked at Princess Bess. Although they didn't reveal anything in their eyes, the threat in their eyes was obvious. Since the princess consort dared to interfere in the fight for the throne, then don't blame them for being merciless. However, Bess had no other choice. She knew that she couldn't hide the fact that she was here, but she had to do it. In this way, she had indeed offended both the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction. Perhaps she would be eliminated one day. However, if she didn't do anything, then no matter who ascended the throne, she would still be unable to escape death. Rather than waiting for death, why not take a gamble? After sending everyone away, Yu Ruifeng called Yuan Song and Lin Shiqi to discuss how to investigate the king's death and how to deal with the three parties to achieve their goals. However, Lin Shiqi said, "Darren, I will not follow you into the palace." Yu Ruifeng looked at him in confusion, but he didn't ask because he knew that Lin Shiqi would explain it to him. "I'm ashamed to say that I've only joined the Dark Thunder Guards for a short period of time. I really don't have much experience in investigating cases. I believe that with you Darren and Yuan Darren, we will be able to solve this case quickly. Your humble servant would like to start from Guan Feihong's clues and see what he encountered and discovered. If I'm not wrong, the person who planted the mind-controlling voodoo in him must be someone from the Gu God sect. This means that he has been in contact with the Gu God sect. We can inquire about the internal information of the Gu God sect through him." "Alright." Yu Ruifeng immediately agreed. He had a grudge against the Gu God sect. Moreover, Lin Shiqi was right. The Dark Thunder Guards would enter the palace to investigate, so it didn't matter if he joined them. It was better to let Lin Shiqi out and start with Guan Feihong. Maybe they could find another clue. At noon, Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song took a few Dark Thunder Guards into the palace. Lin Shiqi waited for Guan Feihong in the post house for a while. Lin Shiqi pulled him into the room and began to carefully observe Guan Feihong. Although Lin Shiqi himself was also affected by the mind-controlling voodoo, it was removed by Jiu Li after that. Therefore, he wasn't very clear about the specific state of the affected person. At this moment, Guan Feihong was a little depressed, but there was nothing unusual. Lin Shiqi asked, "Old Guan, how do you feel?" Guan Feihong saw that Lin Shiqi even called him Old Guan. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but this made him feel a little familiar. He replied, "Darren, this feeling is very strange. Last time you temporarily removed the mind-controlling voodoo. Now I know that I've been poisoned. I also have my own consciousness. However, once the person who cast the spell orders me, I can't control myself and regard the order as an oracle. No matter what, I have to complete it." "I see." Lin Shiqi understood. "Then can you tell me now what is your relationship with the Gu God sect?" Guan Feihong smiled bitterly. He stopped himself from speaking. "Actually, this subordinate is originally from Zhulu country. My father is from the Western Wilderness Prefecture and my mother is from the Zhulu country. I inherited my father's appearance. When I was young, I was also a disciple of the Gu God sect. However, the Gu God sect was full of danger. The reason why my master accepted me was that he wanted to use me to refine voodoo. Later, I plotted to kill my master, but the matter was exposed. Therefore, I had to escape to the Western Wilderness Prefecture and by chance, joined the Blood Cloak Pavilion. It turned out that Guan Feihong was an abandoned disciple of the Gu God sect. Ling Shiqi asked again, then how did you get affected by the mind-controlling voodoo? Alas! Guan Feihong sighed slightly, this is my bad luck. Originally, I planned to go to the Gu God sect to inquire about the news. Who knew that I would run into the Gu God sect's leader, Sang Hetong? He didn't recognize my true identity, but he recognized my identity as a Dark Thunder Guard. Therefore, he thought of using me to provoke the Dark Thunder Guard and the Jingoist sect. Unexpectedly, he ran into Sang Hetong when he went out. Ling Shiqi had to admit that Guan Feihong's luck was really bad. Ling Shiqi tapped the table with his finger and thought quickly. Guan Feihong's mind-controlling voodoo was personally planted by Sang Hetong. Therefore, it would definitely not be used to provoke the Dark Thunder Guard and the Jingoist sect. Moreover, the Jingoist sect, led by Elder Chu Li and Sang Hetong, tried their best to lead the Dark Thunder Guard to Zhulu country. He was afraid that it was not as simple as a conflict with the Jingoist sect. While he was thinking, Guan Feihong's body suddenly stiffened and his eyes became hollow. Although he recovered in less than a breath's time, Ling Shiqi still noticed it. Chapter 362. Ling Shiqi saw Guan Feihong's strange behavior and knew that Sang Hetong must have given Guan Feihong some orders. He hurriedly asked, Old Guan, what did Sang Hetong ask you to do? Guan Feihong's eyes were filled with confusion. Sang Hetong? He's not here. Why would he ask me to do something? Ling Shiqi frowned. He thought to himself, what a powerful mind-controlling voodoo. Fortunately, I had 9 leave by my side. Otherwise, I might not have been able to resist the control of the mind-controlling voodoo even if I had the mind illusion world. Then, he said to Guan Hongfei, empty your mind and don't resist my mental power. Guan Feihong nodded silently. Then, Ling Shiqi used the same trick again and cast a few illusions on Guan Feihong. This time, Guan Feihong gave up resisting, so it was easy to succeed. Guan Feihong immediately said, Sang Hetong asked me to find out if the Dark Thunder Guards and the Jingoist faction had fallen out. He also asked me to secretly stop the Dark Thunder Guards from investigating the king's death. Very good. Ling Shiqi was delighted. Find a chance to send a message to Sang He. Tell him that we and the Jingoist faction are like fire and water. As for the other matter, you can just drag it out slowly. Yes, master. Guan Feihong suddenly thought of something and said, right, yesterday, Sang Hetong secretly brought a large number of experts from the Gu God sect into the king's city. I don't know why. Ling Shiqi's heart jumped, brought a large number of experts. What are their realms? They're all at the Sky Realm. I estimate that 80% of the Gu God sect's experts have been secretly arranged into the king's city. So it's like this. Ling Shiqi murmured. His eyes were shining. He was thinking that since most of the Gu God sect's experts were not at the Gu God Peak, then he could fish in troubled waters. Ling Shiqi had always remembered that his main purpose in coming to Zhulu country was not to complete the Thunderblaze dynasty's mission, but to collect a large number of Gu worms. Now that the back of the Gu God Peak was empty, there probably weren't many experts above the Spirit Aperture realm, so he decided to go there. In any case, he now had the right to act on his own, so he decided to make this trip. After that, Guan Feihong told Ling Shiqi everything he knew about Gushan Peak. After that, he put on his mask and left the city. The Gu God Peak was only a few dozen miles away from the imperial city of the Zhu Road. Ling Shiqi used his ghost steps and arrived at the Gu God Peak at the beginning of the night. According to Guan Feihong's description, Gu God Peak actually had a sect protecting formation, which was created by the previous sect master with countless efforts. Normally, this formation wouldn't reveal itself, but if it was activated, the entire Gu God Peak would be shrouded in poisonous fog. What Ling Shiqi cared about the most was the place where the Gu worms were cultivated. It was on the mountainside of Gushan Peak, where there were several deep caves dedicated to cultivating Gu worms. This was also the destination of Ling Shiqi's trip, but there were always experts guarding the caves, which was troublesome. There were also 2 spirit transformation realm disciples guarding the entrance of the Gu God Peak. Ling Shiqi bypassed them and entered the Gu God Peak. He opened his Byakugan and observed the surrounding spiritual aura. Sure enough, he found that there were only a few spirit pulse realm cultivators below the mountainside of the Gu God Peak. He easily avoided one Gu God sect disciple after another and went straight to the Gu Worm Cave. As he neared the mountainside, he immediately saw 2 auras of spirit aperture stage cultivators leaning against each other in the White Eye's field of vision. These 2 must be the people guarding the Gu Worm Nest. Ling Shiqi had opened 56 spirit veins and had several powerful spiritual techniques. He was confident that he could fight against an early-stage spirit aperture realm cultivator. But if it was 1 against 2, it was impossible. Moreover, this was the Gu God Peak. Once a fight broke out, it would immediately attract other Gu God sect disciples. So he couldn't use force, he could only use his wits. Outside the Gu Worm Cave, there was a male and female spirit aperture realm cultivator sitting cross-legged. Their bodies were glowing with a faint green light. They were obviously cultivating. All of a sudden, a mass of gray evil chi ghost shadow flashed and disappeared. The 2 opened their eyes at almost the same time. The female said, "Where did this evil spirit come from? How dare it cause trouble at the Gu God Peak?" Junior sister Qingbai, "Wait a moment, I'll go check it out." The male next to her stood up. Qingbai's expression was calm. She didn't say anything and just lightly nodded. The male immediately rushed towards the direction where the evil ghost figure disappeared. After a moment, another person wearing a chaotic mask appeared. This was naturally Ling Shiqi. He stood out so openly, Qingbai's eyes suddenly burst out with a cold light. "I knew it was a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. I just happen to lack food for my Gu worms, so I'll use you to make up the numbers." Ling Shiqi said, "Senior sister, you misunderstood." "Who is your senior sister?" Qingbai's voice wasn't loud, but it made people feel as cold as winter. Ling Shiqi didn't say anything. He raised his hand and a green light flashed in his palm. There seemed to be a strange worm wriggling in the light. Qingbai's expression changed when she saw this. Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. "How do you know the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique? Who the hell are you?" Only the core disciples of the Gu God sect were qualified to cultivate this technique. Moreover, they had to be extremely talented disciples. Even Qingbai didn't have the opportunity to cultivate this technique. At this moment, she suddenly saw a stranger with the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. How could she not be shocked? The technique was naturally passed down to me by the sect leader. It's not convenient for me to reveal my identity, but senior sister just needs to know that I'm not an outsider. Ling Shiqi said lightly. Qingbai showed a suspicious expression. She didn't believe Ling Shiqi's words, but the technique on his body couldn't be fake. There was no doubt that it was the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. Qingbai asked, "In that case, what are you doing here?" "Of course, to get some Gu worms." "Do you have the Gu God token?" Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat when he heard the words, Gu God token. He remembered that Guan Feihong had mentioned the Gu God token to him. He couldn't help laughing. "Senior sister, you must be joking. The Gu God token has always been in the hands of the sect leader. How can I have it?" Qingbai's eyes flashed. She didn't get the Gu God token. She continued, "If you want to get the Gu worms, you have to go into the Gu Worm Cave to get rid of them. Do you dare to go in?" Qingbai made a hand seal, and a small mound behind her split open, revealing a large hole. One could see that there were all kinds of Gu worms inside, and it looked extremely terrifying. Ling Shiqi's face under the mask turned slightly pale. Since he dared to come here, he was naturally prepared. He immediately nodded and said, "Of course." Chapter 363. In fact, if a disciple came and went, they would at least need a token. However, Ling Shiqi didn't have anything. It was impossible to take the goo with just his mouth. Even if he had the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, it was still impossible. Moreover, the disciple didn't need to enter the cave with the token. The person in charge of guarding the cave just needed to take out the goo according to the list on the token. The reason why Cheng Bai let Leng Shiqi enter was to test whether Leng Shiqi's 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was real or not. After all, there were many strange things in this world. Maybe she could imitate the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. Therefore, she also wanted to see if Leng Shiqi dared to enter the cave. Could he collect the goo after entering? 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was a technique that specialized in controlling goo. With this technique, 10,000 goo couldn't invade. He would definitely be fine if he entered the cave. If this cultivation method was fake, then it would naturally be eaten to death by countless goo worms. Cheng Bai was a little surprised when she saw Leng Shiqi agree so readily. She secretly wondered if she was overthinking it. But out of caution, she still had to do this. After all, her senior brother had just left and Leng Shiqi appeared. This was too much of a coincidence. Under Cheng Bai's watchful gaze, Leng Shiqi walked into the goo worm cave. There was no place to stand, because everywhere he looked was filled with goo worms. Leng Shiqi used the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique and instantly felt a sense of familiarity with the countless goo. Moreover, the goo no longer rejected Leng Shiqi. Instead, they happily rushed over. Looking at the countless goo of different colors, Leng Shiqi didn't reject them all. He had studied goo worms before. The goo worms that could be nurtured in this goo worm cave were all common goo worms. The truly precious goo worms had to be nurtured by oneself. And Leng Shiqi didn't need goo worms with offensive abilities. It would be best if they had all kinds of strange abilities. Thus, Leng Shiqi was also observing these goo worms. Soon, he found a group of purple goo worms that looked like spiders. This type of goo worm was called the poisonous spider goo. If it was used together with the goo spirit spider web, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Leng Shiqi waved his hand, and dozens of poisonous spider goo crawled up his arm, breaking through his skin and entering his body. Strangely, there was no wound on Leng Shiqi's arm, nor was there any blood. This was the unique characteristic of the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, feeding the goo with one's own body. Seeing this, Cheng Bai was finally relieved. Although she didn't know Leng Shiqi's identity, the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill was real. Next, Leng Shiqi discovered a type of goo called the meridian sucking goo. This type of goo would attach itself to the meridians after it entered the body and continuously suck away at the meridians. However, it would not destroy the meridians for a short period of time. That kind of inhuman pain was enough to make one shudder in fear. This meridian-sucking goo could be used to replace the centipede curse. Then, Leng Shiqi chose the goo that he liked in the cave. As time passed, Cheng Bai's expression became more and more shocked. Because even if it was her, she could not stay in the goo worm cave for so long. At this time, the senior brother who just left also came back. He saw someone enter the cave and asked Cheng Bai, "Junior sister Cheng, who is that person?" Cheng Bai retracted her gaze and shook her head. "I don't know, but he has the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill. He must be a disciple that some elder secretly took in." The senior brother was shocked when he heard that Leng Shiqi had the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill, but his eyes immediately turned into unwillingness and greed. He said in a low voice, "Junior sister, this person has a shady background. The evil aura phantom that floated away just now might have been made by him. He wanted to lure me away." "I know." Cheng Bai's expression was slightly cold. The senior brother frowned. "Then why did you let him enter the cave?" This time, Cheng Bai ignored him. The senior brother's eyes flashed and he said in realization, "So junior sister wants to use the cave to test whether he is real or not. Junior sister is really considerate. However, his identity is still too suspicious. I think we should still report this matter. If there is a problem, we won't be punished." Cheng Bai still didn't say anything and only nodded lightly. The senior brother's mouth twitched and he snorted. He didn't say anything else, but his eyes kept flickering as he stared at Leng Shiqi. After half an hour, Leng Shiqi had already hidden over 1,000 gu in his body. It wasn't until he couldn't store any more that he reluctantly walked out. He saw the senior brother and sister as soon as he came out. He said, "Senior brother, senior sister, junior brother has already taken the gu, so I will take my leave." "Wait!" Senior brother suddenly shouted in a low voice. Leng Shiqi's footsteps paused and he turned around. "Senior brother, what do you think? You don't have our sect's identity token, nor do you have the gu token. Junior sister Cheng is magnanimous and saw that you have the 10,000 gu devouring spirit skill, so she let you in. But if you don't give us a reason, don't even think about leaving." Speaking of this, the senior brother's eyes turned sinister. Leng Shiqi snorted coldly, "Humph, I gave you face and called you senior brother. You are Lord's sect leader and are plotting something big, and I am a key part of it. As for my identity, if you really know my identity, I'm afraid even you will be killed. Do you still want to know?" The senior brother was shocked by Leng Shiqi's words. He couldn't tell if Leng Shiqi was telling the truth or not. Sect leader Sang He Tong was indeed plotting something big recently, and he needed the help of an outsider. Could this person be a key part of the sect leader's plan? "It's fine if you don't believe me." After Leng Shiqi finished speaking, a strange rhythm came from his mouth. When the gu worms in the gu worm cave heard this sound, they all wriggled out excitedly. Cheng and Bai exclaimed at the same time, "Imperial gu demonic sound." Immediately after, they looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Imperial gu demonic sound was a spiritual technique that only spirit aperture realm cultivators in the gu god sect could cultivate. This spiritual technique's rank was 4th level, neither high nor low. However, it could control gu in a large area, so only spirit aperture realm cultivators could cultivate it. The two of them also knew this spiritual technique, but what shocked them the most was that Leng Shiqi's imperial gu demonic sound was even more profound than theirs. A spirit aperture realm cultivator not only had the 10,000 gu devouring spirit skill, but also the imperial gu demonic sound. Furthermore, his cultivation level was even higher than theirs. At the very least, he was at the large success stage. Such a person was definitely a genius disciple that the sect should focus on nurturing. Leng Shiqi said indifferently, "Now you should believe me. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.